That's what this is. Wake up. You're in the middle of it.
You better wake up and listen to what you're saying.
Which is a morning show. Wake up.
What the hell? Wake up, everyone.
And a good Wednesday morning, little spitting rain on your commute in here on this November 6th. I would say not a lot of things anymore turn me into a state of awe in the sports world, but I had a moment last night.
Oh, did you? Was it the Cowboys going to get Jonathan Mingo for a fifth-round pick? Was that it? You're like, oh, my God, what's Jerry Jones doing?
Jerry has probably created numbness in my sports fandom.
Fair enough.
You've seen it all. When Andrew Luck retires during the middle of a preseason game.
In a preseason game, yeah.
That probably resets everything from a sports awe moment standpoint.
Understandable. So what was it? Let's go.
I was shocked, stunned, had to pinch myself.
Okay.
Are Joey Galloway and Booger McFarland debating the Indiana football resume on the college football rankings?
It's not even that. And yes, of course, I watched that. It was the biggest thing that was happening yesterday was IU at number 8 in Notre Dame. You're Fighting Irish.
Undoubtedly.
At number 10. But it's funny. It's like before they put the rankings up on ESPN, which one of them was it? Was it Booger goes, IU is underrated and they're being dismissed. And Reese Davis goes, Booger, they haven't even put the rankings up yet on the television screen. You know that big guy. Come on.
That is former Colt, former NFL trade deadline.
Yes, it is.
Colt player Booger McFarland. Mobiles around Bloomington for Booger defending the Hoosiers last night. Joey Galloway feeling differently. Indiana, as Andy said, number 8 in the first college football rankings. We'll break down that first bracket and continue to take a look ahead to all of a sudden the basketball season opener takes a back burner in Bloomington here on this Wednesday morning. So plenty to get to on that end. The Colts go through another trade deadline without any moves. And I would say one of their more marquee, certainly a long-tenured player, heads to injured reserve. And the Pacers back at home tonight. The Paolo Banchero-less Orlando Magic. The Pacers try to turn this into a little bit of a 3-4, get back to 500. And they'll have that opportunity tonight as a 6.5-point favorite inside the Fieldhouse.
Yeah, coming up at 7:35, I want to talk a little bit more, I guess, about IU football. I mean, I don't know how many times, maybe this is, as they keep expanding the playoff and it's at 12 right now, maybe there will be more times that Indiana football is in the mix and has a chance, a legitimate chance to make the college football playoff. But I found a couple things interesting with them. We'll dive into that, but good for IU. I mean, number 8 in the country, everything in front of them. A huge game, obviously, against Michigan upcoming. So I found that to be interesting. Our guy, Jason Hammer, who joins us tomorrow around 9:30. I wonder if he slept, by the way. Hammer will join us around 9:30 tomorrow. I think Indiana could walk into Tennessee and win. I know it's crazy. I love Tennessee's defense. Talking about football, of course. I love Tennessee's defense, but do not love Josh Heupel's offense. So we'll see what happens there. Still, obviously, several weeks to go in the season. IU basketball in action tonight. I have a thought on them. And then, I don't know how you feel about it, but, tonight's one of those games for the Pacers without Banchero, who dropped a 50-burger on you last week. I mean, don't you feel like this is, you got to take advantage and you got to beat the teams that you're supposed to beat?
Yes.
And usually Orlando would not fit that mold, okay? I mean, Orlando's proven to really have it against the Pacers, but tonight without a guy who is 50 points and 5 assists and 8 rebounds, whatever he's averaging, whatever he had the other night against the Pacers, to me, KB, this fits in a mold of you got to go win a game, got to beat the teams that you can beat, that you should beat, and tonight is one of those games. Should be a good one.
You get the opportunity of another home injured playoff team. You had that with Philly in the opener on that Sunday afternoon. You didn't take advantage of it. Tonight, you have that. If you look at Orlando without Banchero, well, frankly, they haven't won since they beat you a week and a half ago.
Oh, is that true?
And their last 2 games, it looks like the Orlando Magic of, Marcin Gortat, for some reason, is popping into my head, but that's a slap in the face at Gortat. 85 and 86.
Yeah.
That's what they've scored the last 2. So, yes, this is you're favored by 6.5 for a reason. The Pacers still a little banged up. No Aaron Nesmith, Andrew Nembhard questionable. But, yes, take care of business on your home floor tonight. Colts back to practice today. It will be Josh Allen. Kind of weirdly, Josh Allen started more than 100 games in his career, none of them at Lucas Oil Stadium. It'll be the first time that he has played inside of that building. Again, that line has shrunk a bit. a 4-point favorite. You know, the fascinating thing about Allen, you watch him play, and I feel like there's so many moments that I'm watching Josh Allen do his Houdini-type acts, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he's about to turn the ball over.
Oh, yeah, like 15 times a game.
He's carrying the ball like a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
Like he's just going to get smoked.
Yeah.
The ball's going to pop in the air. It's going to look like Gary Brackett against Sage Rosenfels. And
Sage Rosenfels.
And the defense is going to have a game-changing turnover. And literally every single time, Allen makes the play.
Yeah, something good happens.
He makes a play. 17 touchdowns, 2 interceptions on the year. He's on every MVP ballot. How the Colts handle him, of course, will be a big storyline. Stephen Holder at 8. It is interesting. And I say this in all seriousness, Andy. Chris Ballard has really gone about this 2024 offseason in one of the quietest transactional offseasons I have seen in his 8-year era now. And I mean that in all seriousness. Obviously, Ballard is not a super active, out-of-the-building guy, but we have seen moments where he has definitely done that. Free agent classes that have been a little bit bigger, even in-season waiver claims or free agent signings.
Well, Sammy Womack this year was a good pickup. Well, he's been a starting corner. You picked him up right before the season.
I would argue, and again, maybe I'm missing people, Womack, Joe Flacco, Raekwon Davis.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I can't think of anyone else.
Like, it is one of the quietest, and it's not like I expected something at the trade deadline, but, again, it is a moment in time where if you look at the NFL, I believe 25 of the 32 teams executed a trade here in season. The Colts, for the 7th time in 8 years under Ballard, did not make a trade. And so it's just, and I guess, again, it's a question for Steven, why so gung-ho on the in-house? Throughout all levels of the offseason, you go back to March, you go to, Ballard's a big, staunch, roster building's a 12-month process, blah, blah, blah. Like, that is something he heavily believes in. Why have we not really seen any of it?
Well, and he's made a couple trades around the trade deadline that have both been good for the Colts, right? Has he not? He's made a couple trades that you would look back on now, having some time away from them and say, those are pretty good trades. I went yesterday, and listen, there are teams like the Cleveland Browns who decided to, move away from some players, and we understand that they're going to be kind of cleaning house, if you will. The Saints had to do that with Marshawn Lattimore. I'm not even looking at the NFC where teams like Washington, made big moves. Let's focus on the AFC. The Ravens went out and got a corner. They got a couple players, but they got a corner. The Steelers went out and got Preston Smith, a former double-digit sack guy in the NFL, and they went out and got wide receiver Mike Williams. Yesterday during the show, the Bengals went out. They've had running back issues. Zach Moss has had the injury there in Cincinnati, so what do? They go get Khalil Herbert. I know it's a couple days, I know it's a week or so ago, but Amari Cooper goes to the Buffalo Bills. The Chiefs go out. They get a lineman. They go out. They get DeAndre Hopkins, who immediately has, 80-some yards and 2 touchdowns in the win. In the win on Sunday. I mentioned the Browns. The Browns and Titans were able to sell. So if you look at the standings right now in the AFC, the first team, the second team, the third team, the fifth team, all did something to make themselves better.
Yeah, it was really just Houston that didn't do anything.
And I'm surprised by that.
Right.
Quite frankly.
Because they've had some injuries.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they didn't look at one of these wide receivers. I'm surprised they didn't. Not Mingo, but, whether it be Mike Williams or Darius Slayton for the Giants to go out there and get a quality player. And I bring it up, and it's like I'm stuck, and do you feel this way? Maybe you don't. Like, I'm not bashing Chris Ballard for not making a move on trade deadline. A lot of teams didn't make a move, or a lot of teams, if they did make a move, it wasn't a big move, or they're selling off. But this is the problem with being in the middle. You're not good enough to go for it. You're not bad enough to do what we talked about yesterday, KB, and that is, the 5 or 6 guys that you may not bring back who are on this team that are on contract years. You're not going to be able to bring back all these guys that you're also not going to get anything now for them. And so it's just when you're stuck in the middle, that's why you have a trade deadline, and there's 4 or 5 teams around you, a couple of which you could, especially if you went on Sunday, be battling for position in the AFC standings, if that's even silly to talk about. And they all did something. They all got better in some way. Joe Burrow yesterday, he had his press conference. He says, I'm happy we at least did something to try to get better at the trade deadline, and Colts fans for another year cannot say that.
Ryan Kelly to injured reserve. He's been battling a calf injury. There's been moments I've seen him walk around and thinking, gosh, I'm shocked he can even give it a go on Sundays. He played every snap Sunday night in Minnesota. We have brought this up on different levels here. I think recently, even as of yesterday, like Tanner Bortolini, I think has played pretty quality football when he's gone in there for Kelly. Now this is going to be at least 4 games of Bortolini.
What is it, passing of the torch moment? Come on.
Is it that?
Yeah.
I think it's a
how is
fair
it not?
question to be asked. Again, a contract year for the 31-year-old Kelly on that end. So that news item late yesterday.
Can I ask you something on that?
Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, Ryan Kelly, his play the last few weeks has diminished. We talked about that yesterday, the Pro Football Focus numbers. And so he has an injury, and now it's time. It's like, okay, you're not playing well and you're injured. Let's go ahead and think about it. They don't feel the same about Michael Pittman Jr. I mean, I would have to think his back is a contributing factor. I mean, what did you say? Had 3 catches in the last 2 games?
Right.
Something like that?
Play time did decrease a decent amount on Sunday Night Football. Now, he still was out there for 75% of the snaps, but he was 95 the week prior. And this gets back to the evaluating everything phrase we heard from Shane Steichen 9 days ago. Evaluating everything has meant what? Just the Richardson benching?
Well, Tyler Goodson got benched. That's the only thing I can think of.
Tyler Goodson's like a sprinkle on a 5-course meal.
I know.
It's like it is. So like, what did that mean? Again, if we're really, really nitpicking, did it mean a little bit less Pittman? Because when evaluating everything was brought up, all of a sudden I'm thinking, wait, is Shane still calling the plays?
Mm-hmm.
Are they now at the trade deadline? There were other things that I thought about. Personnel wise, do you do anything differently with that? But it looks like, based off how the last week plus has played out, a game has happened, the trade deadline has happened, et cetera, et cetera. It's just that. So, again, Stephen Holder coming up at 8 to talk more about this. For those that missed it last night, can't imagine the television sets would have been anywhere else. Maybe Maction.
Oh, boy. I did check into those games. There wasn't much there. I besides the political stuff, my alternative was The Office last night.
Oh, well, that's...
it's always on.
Honestly, that's probably perfect television.
It's always on. Go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted
you.
Well,
here I am scrambling to check to make sure that our Cardinals won last night. Did they get it done? No, they lost.
Oh, Ball State lost.
Miami of Ohio getting the one. That's big for Notre Dame's resume.
That's Big Ben.
Indiana at Tennessee, as you said. The winner would get Oregon. So there you are, 8-9. Notre Dame fell in at 10. This is in the bracket.
Mm-hmm.
10 in the bracket. Penn State would be the 7 seed, so it would be Notre Dame at Happy Valley, the winner getting Georgia. Other first-round matchups, Boise at Ohio State. The winner gets BYU on a neutral field. We talked about this at the start of the year. The 5 seed is the greatest thing in the world. You host the Power 5, and then you get the weak-ass Big 12 champion on a neutral field.
Boy,
there.
Not a good night for the Big 12 and ACC. They got told, y'all getting one in, and that's all.
Alabama, Texas, the other first-round matchup. Alabama at Texas, winner gets Miami. So I bring all this up to say this, Andy. Indiana comes in at 8 in the rankings.
Yes, they do.
9 in the projected bracket because you bump up BYU as the conference champion, one of those top 4 seeds. That is 2 spots of wiggle room for Indiana. You can be 10, you can be 11, and still get in. We heard them nitpick Indiana last night. The good, they're blowing these teams out. It's crazily impressive what they've done to these teams. The counter, they have the worst strength of schedule of anybody in the top 10. Ward Manuel, the chair, made that very clear. Is 2 spots enough for a close loss at Ohio State?
That's the question.
That's the question now for the rest of the month of, obviously you want to beat Michigan handily. You want to beat Purdue handily. But how competitive do you need to be with Ohio State to only drop to 10 or 11? I guess 9 or 10 with those rankings. That is the question that I would have with Indiana right now and that resume.
And then the 2 teams right on the outside, you have Texas A&M, right?
It's the SEC that's lurking. SMU is technically the first team out, but then doesn't it go, is it A&M, LSU, Ole Miss? Is that 14, 15, 16?
Yeah, and so A&M has Texas. And so if you're an IU fan, you need A&M to
you
lose.
Want Texas to win.
Yeah, you need to
if you're IU right now, you are cheering for the Georgias and the Texases of the SEC.
Damn right you are. The Blue Bloods, if you will. I would say SMU, looking at them, they're, boy, I tell you, they have a Louisville win, and that is it. I mean, they have nothing. So I'm interested at the end of the year what their strength of schedule is going to look like if, once Indiana has, Michigan, Ohio State under their belt. The reason I say that is SMU plays Cal, at Virginia, home Boston College. I mean, those are dogs. They should win all three of those games.
If SMU beats Miami in the conference championship, how far does Miami fall?
Sure.
You hear them last night.
Oh, they had no answer for it.
They're acting like those championship games will mean very little.
It's eye test. I mean, Ward Manuel basically said it's eye test.
So, eye test, you would think favors IU right now. I mean, again,
when you win games by 35 points.
If you're IU, you probably want eye test more than, I guess, margin is helping them out numbers-wise, but more than strength of schedule. So, again, I think Indiana will continue to be a pretty fascinating case study on that, and obviously they could take care of business and win in Columbus here coming up in a couple of weeks. But certainly, as I said to lead off the show, I was in awe last night.
It is
literally
unreal.
watching the college football playoff, and one of the heavily debated topics was the Indiana college football team's resume.
And it wasn't like they were the disrespected team. They were not the disrespected team. You could say, well, I thought they should be a spot or two ahead or behind. That's fine. If the matchups were today, I actually like their matchup having to go on the road against Tennessee. So busy show today. As KB mentioned, Stephen Holder coming up at 8 o'clock, a busy 9 o'clock hour as well. We'll talk some IU, Zach Osterman at 9:30, some Pacers with Tony East at 9 o'clock. As for the Pacers, reminder tonight, Pacers Magic, our coverage here on The Fan at 6:30. Should remind everyone, IU and SIU Edwardsville. That's 7 o'clock. That's going to be over on WIBC. Coming up next, your morning check down news scores from overnight. Appreciate you waking up with us on this Wednesday hump day. 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
Brought to you by Marion University Football, pursuing another NAIA championship this season. Don't miss the on-campus action at Ascension St. Vincent Field. Visit NUKnights.com for tickets.
All right, a lot to get to on this morning check down. Pacers in action. Mike Woodson's third season underway, and a quiet trade deadline for the Colts. Andy Sweeney, feel free to lead off wherever.
Well, yeah, let's start with the trade deadline. Like you mentioned, the Colts didn't do anything. I don't think that's a surprise. It's also, I don't know if it's too much bashing. Again, we talked about it. They're kind of in the middle. Do you buy? Do you sell? And they're going to stay where they are. Not a surprise. You know, I thought yesterday Zadarius Smith got moved to the Detroit Lions defensive end. That was interesting. I don't know if anything else stood out to you. Mike Williams on the move. That never worked out with the Jets. It just never did. So the Steelers get him and defensive end Preston Smith. That's interesting. Zach Moss yesterday with the Cincinnati Bengals. Of course, we remember him last year. Played so good here in Indianapolis last year. He is done for the season now. Khalil Herbert gets moved from Chicago to Cincinnati. So a bunch of other moves. I'll get your thoughts on just one of them. The one that's really making the headlines. The Cowboys acquiring Carolina Panthers wide receiver Jonathan Mingo for a fourth-round pick is what they gave up for Jonathan Mingo. And, of course, people are looking at what the Steelers had to give up for Mike Williams and what the Ravens had to do to get Deontay Johnson and, of course, Kansas City and DeAndre Hopkins, and they're making fun of Jerry Jones. So, you know what? If I can't have anything nice, neither can they. That's how I view the trade deadline yesterday. Good job, Jerry.
Yeah, Jonathan Mingo's done nothing, right?
I have no idea. I mean, I could look it up, but
he's got
12 catches on the season. He's got 12 catches, KB.
Pretty much the
40 last year.
Entire top of the AFC did something. Houston was the team that did not do anything. I was a bit surprising. The Colts, one of 7 teams not to be involved in a trade here at the trade deadline. And again, the news item from yesterday, Ryan Kelly to injured reserve, so he will miss at least 4 games. Tanner Bortolini back in the lineup there, and I think the real conversation is that it for Ryan Kelly in a Colts uniform? Certainly a debate here throughout the rest of this year and early in the offseason. All right, tonight inside of Gainbridge Fieldhouse, Pacers back at home. They are 6.5-point favorite over the Orlando Magic. No Paolo Banchero, oblique injury for him right after he put 50 on the Pacers about 2 weeks ago. And Orlando has lost 4 in a row since that game. They've scored 85 and 86 their last 2 games.
That's unbelievable. What is it, 1996?
I know. Is it shot clock all of a sudden changed here?
1994.
For the Magic.
It's unbelievable.
This is a great opportunity for the Pacers at home to get a win. It would be 3 of 4. It would be 2 in a row. It would get them back to 500. No Aaron Nesmith, Andrew Nemhard questionable. I thought Rick Carlisle had a lot of interesting comments with us yesterday. We can get to some of those throughout the show, and we will see if the Pacers have a Goga Batadze tribute video for tonight.
I'm sure they do.
They could play that clip when he yelled at, was it Greg Foster, the assistant coach?
Oh, man.
During one of those COVID games.
You're bringing up old,
the arena
terrible
was so
memories.
Quiet.
You could hear everything.
I think you could hear that up at, where they've got, the banners hanging up there. Goga back in the building tonight.
Obviously what was going on in the country was not fun, but when we had the COVID games, I just remember empty gyms, John Calipari screaming, "Go!" just over, and then that's all you could hear for the entire game. As for college basketball tonight, we'll talk about it on the other end, but it's year number 3 for Mike Woodson. Indiana hosting SIU Edwardsville, the Cougars, if you will. Kevin Bowen, a 28.5-point favorite. Mike Woodson and company. Also, a lot of ranked teams in action tonight. You've Arkansas in action. You've Creighton, UConn, Auburn, and Rutgers. Rutgers is a top 25 team, and they have the 2 superstar freshmen that everybody's talking about. So, again, tonight, you can catch the game over on WIBC.
Yeah, again, IU, certainly plenty of intrigue for this season, for what it's worth, in the 2 exhibition games. 10 of 44 from behind the arc. Is that the age-old question with this team? Is there enough shooting to be a, second weekend team? Whatever you kind of draw the baseline or the bar for Indiana here this season. A couple other items of note for me. Thursday night football, cheer for the Ravens if you are the Colts. Ravens, Bengals. Cincinnati is right there with Indy, kind of knocking on or just outside of the playoff picture. So let Baltimore, I think, kind of run away with the AFC North if that is a thing. I would put that out there. And again, the college football rankings from last night. We'll hit on this on several points here on this Wednesday morning. Indiana was 8th in those rankings. You will see them 9th in the bracket.
It's confusing.
That is because BYU is 9th in the rankings, but they are the Big 12 champ. And again, 4 buys for the conference champs, Big 10, SEC, ACC, and Big 12. Notre Dame is 10th in the rankings.
You okay with that?
But they are 10th in the bracket because
Right.
BYU is just above them.
I think Notre Dame can go on the road and beat Penn State. James Franklin doesn't win big games. Come on, Marcus Freeman. He can win that.
Notre Dame's standing is pretty even. They should be favored in the rest of their games. You know, they do have Army, who is ranked. They do have, I mean, who the hell knows what USC will be like to end the year. But Notre Dame, I think it's pretty status quo. You win out, you're in. And if you win out, I think there's a chance you're a top 8 seed and you host game. Indiana, it's a little bit more complicated because their schedule has at Ohio State, which is obviously their toughest game of the season. What would a loss mean? Do they need to be competitive in that? I think these are all debates we'll probably have here over the month of November.
All right, Thursday morning check down on this Wednesday. Let's take a break. Coming up on the other side, IU football. You mentioned it there, KB. A thought on IU basketball. Pivotal year number 3 for Mike Woodson and company. Plus, Anthony Richardson not available for teams that may have called yesterday. Our thoughts on that as well. Appreciate you waking up with us. Wake up call right here. It's a Wednesday on The Fan.
It's the Wake Up Call with KB and Andy on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Stephen Holder going to join us here at the top of the hour. Andy, a question I do want to toss Stephen's way. What is it going to take for another quarterback change? Is it more of Joe Flacco struggles, or is it more of Anthony Richardson's been accurate in his 3 passes to Anthony Gould in practice this week, and he's studying well?
No,
I mean, I ask that in all seriousness.
To me, it's all Joe Flacco, and I guess are they losing a bunch of games where the final couple games of the year you let Anthony play because you're not going to make the postseason? I hate to say that.
Yeah, is there? It is probably all rooted in Flacco, but is there anything Richardson can do himself? And yesterday, I tried to ask Jim Bob Cooter, where does he want to see Anthony Richardson grow the most? And
he said everywhere.
I think Max Bowen would have given me more of a direct answer than Jim Bob Cooter gave
some
me.
of Jim Bob Cooter's answers. Remember, earlier in the season, he would have 2-minute answers. Some of those answers shortened up a little bit. When he got to Anthony Richardson, I think he said he needs to improve in several different areas, was the quote from Jim Bob Cooter yesterday. Yeah, okay.
The lack of transparency or detail in Anthony Richardson related questions, I guess you could look at it and say it's a bit damning in one sense, but it is certainly lacking right now from the Colts side of it. So we'll get more into that conversation coming up. Colts and Bills, Andrew Catalan, Tiki Barber, Devin McCourty joining us here, CBS, 1 o'clock on Sunday.
Get ready, baby. 1 o'clock on Sunday. IU basketball or football? Which one do you want to talk about here
let's
first?
Start football.
You want to start?
I was in all last night. Could not believe it.
KB was in all last night. He was locked into the college football playoff rankings show. I guess just for me, just quickly, I didn't think IU football was really disrespected.
See, some people thought they were. Some people are pissed that Penn State's above them.
That would be the only team that I could look at and ruffle any feathers. The flip side is what Penn State has is potentially what Indiana is also going to have on their resume, and that is a good loss. You would hope a close loss to Ohio State. And I think that's a place to start. But for me, I didn't think Indiana was too disrespected. Listen, this is you remember at the beginning of the year, KB, when I brought up we brought this up a few different times about they canceled the rest of the series with Louisville.
Yeah.
And, this year now Louisville has worked their way back into, what were they, 22, 23?
Yeah, something like that.
Something, which is good for Notre Dame, by the way.
Ranked win for the Irish.
That's a very good win. They need them to stay somewhere in the top 25, which I think they very well could on the back end there. And so, it's interesting because that hasn't been brought up. And I was wondering if that would ever affect IU. And then everybody yelled at me, well, if you're IU, you're trying to get to a bowl game. And, of course, if you can cancel that series and get someone in there, you can win. I wonder if that is a conversation going forward, because obviously everyone in Bloomington's surprised by this, because if you weren't, you would have played that game.
Can you
go ahead? Sorry.
I apologize for interrupting. I just laugh at, imagine Scott Dolson. I assume he was the spearheader.
Wow,
of this decision of being a genie in his office back when this decision was made. I think it was right before the start of last season.
It was.
And saying, Scott, be careful.
Be careful now.
You're going to be a playoff team next year.
You want to make that college football playoff,
that
Scotty
strength
D.
of schedule is going to be heavily debated. Because if they, to put it in simple terms, if they had the Louisville game, and obviously they would have to win the game. It would have been in Louisville. It would have been a road game.
It would have been.
In Louisville. But if they had that, they could withstand the Ohio State loss, and I don't think there'd be any debate. I think an 11-1 team.
I agree with you.
With a road non-conference ranked win
Top
at an
25
ACC
win.
team.
Yep.
That would be enough on a Big Ten team's resume to be 11-1 and have no debate. Whereas the reality is, we're going to debate it. Whether we should or not, we are, and the 2-loss SEC teams are going to scream loud, very loud about it. So, those are all hypotheticals down the road if Indiana cannot pull off the upset in Columbus.
But, even so, and I've said this a couple different times, if they did get matched up with a team like Tennessee, I love it. I don't know. I just think that would be a fun game. I think they would have a chance. So Indiana at 8, again, it tells them that in front of them if they win games, they're not going to be left out of this thing. And I think, last night, I think you saw it with the guys that were talking about it. I think there is a level of respect and, hey, this is pretty cool what's going on in Bloomington. Sometimes cool stories happen in college football and they get pushed aside. And when we had the college football playoff at 4, they most definitely got pushed aside. It was, come on, peasant, get out of the way. The expansion, it's a perfect year and a perfect schedule and a perfect coach to have the stars align to where I think they legitimately have a chance. And listen, IU can be difficult because of who they played or who they have not played, because their strength of schedule is in the 100s. And then I was reading Heather Dinich this morning on ESPN, and besides BYU, who many people believe got screwed over the most, many people believe they should have been ahead of like Miami. Like they should have been a top 3 team in the country if you go by some metrics. The other difficult team is your Fighting Irish. I mean, they're a difficult team. If you look at some of the games, you'd say, I don't know. How good are they? And then they lose to NIU, and you don't really pay attention to them. And then their win at Texas A&M was a nice win a couple months ago, but now it's a much better win. Now it's one of the better wins that you could have on a resume. And you combine that now with the Louisville win that the last couple weeks, that's turned into a good win. So, listen, I love the expansion of this thing I was skeptical of. Last night, and Indiana specifically shows you why this could work and this could be a cool thing. The last thing on it is Big 12 and ACC have zero respect. I mean, you're going to get 4 Big Ten teams in. You're going to get 4 SEC teams in, unless one of these teams just absolutely falls apart. You're going to get a Boise State. You're going to get one out of the ACC. You're going to get one of the Big 12, and that's the way we're going to go. I mean, that much is clear. They have no respect for the Big 12 or ACC. None.
Indiana 2-touchdown favorite over Michigan, and certainly the Ohio State game. It's playing out the favorites the rest of the way, but that will be a game that I don't think that spread will be as massive as we thought at the start of the season. We'll see if Indiana, coming off their bye week, could pull off that upset. Also tonight, again, SIU Edwardsville. That is the opponent for the opener for Mike Woodson. Year 4 for Mike Woodson. I misspoke earlier. I said year 3. 8 o'clock Big Ten Network for that one. They are a 28.5-point favorite. Certainly, again, plenty of intrigue for the roster retool that Mike Woodson and company had this offseason. Do you make anything of 10 of 44 from 3 in the 2 exhibition games, or do you say, no, these guys have resumes that are better shooters? Look, Goody, for example, has shot it better in his career. Or is this like wait a minute, is this thing still an issue?
Yeah, I'm going to wait till the season starts on that. Also, we need to watch out how bad they are at the free throw line this year. Remember last year?
They were better. I think they were better in the exhibition games.
So
I know
bad
that was
last year.
Honestly, that was probably the most alarming thing.
It really was. Listen, to me this year, this is the perfect year for IU basketball. And what I mean, or if you're a fan, and what I mean by that is sometimes you get true clarity on a situation. And Mike Woodson, to me, fits that mold. You get true clarity on Mike Woodson this year. There's no excuse. He has been there a number of years. These are his players. He has returning guys who have stuck with the program and are good players like a Trey Galloway. He has a 5-star freshman. He's got 2 bigs. He's got a guy like Mackenzie Mbako, who was a big recruit last year, who got better. You would imagine he is going to be better this year. If you want to play big in your Mike Woodson, you can play big. If you want to go small and you want to put Mbako at the 4, not to get too much into the weeds, you can do that. You went out, you got a couple guards. I think Miles Rice, I think he's going to be pretty good. I think Indiana fans are going to like him. So you got better at guard. You went out there and you paid, and you got a dominant double-double center to put next to Malik Renew, who was pretty damn good last year. And so, to me, this is a deep team. Right now, it doesn't look like, unless that three-point shooting just continues to stink, and the free throw shooting, it doesn't look like you have a bunch of deficiencies. Last year, it was like you're hanging on. It felt like, especially at that guard position. So if you're an Indiana fan, I mean, Purdue is coming off, Purdue was fighting with, who was it? Who'd they play the other night?
Corpus Christi.
Corpus Christi. I mean, they were fighting kind of to the last 4 or 5 minutes of that game. so the team down the road from you can be better than them. I know Mike Woodson yesterday was like, we want to win the national title in the Big Ten. And I'm like, slow down a little bit. But Indiana, if Mike Woodson is who we think he can be, then they need to be better than Purdue in the Big Ten. And, they need to be a seed to where they can strike in the NCAA tournament. If not, I mean, if you're an 8 seed or a 7 seed in the tournament and Purdue and a number of other teams are better than you in the Big Ten, then it's just not going to, it's just Mike Woodson's not the guy. I mean, that's just going to be the point. So I think there's a lot riding on this season. I really do for Indiana.
Living in the present of tonight for Indiana, it's important that you beat the you-know-what out of these opponents.
I know.
Last year, they did not do that. And you bring up Purdue the other night. Now, that turned into a 17-point final score. If that is a 6 or 7-point final score, that's obviously not good for Purdue from a resume standpoint. But the thing that Purdue is afforded is they have multiple opportunities with their non-conference schedule to make up for that. Indiana's non-conference schedule has very little margin for error. Again, we mentioned yesterday South Carolina, a team that theoretically was, a 6 seed last year in the tournament. They lost their opener to North Florida. That is a team that is on Indiana's non-conference schedule. So, I don't know. Maybe we're in this we're really dissecting Indiana resumes, college football-wise, but also basketball-wise. A huge reason why their net ranking was so poor last season was because, to put it in simple terms, they didn't sniff covering these sorts of opponents last year. Tonight, it's a 28.5-point spread. I know some people might think, hey, you're making way too much out of a November 6th basketball game.
You're actually not.
But this is how the metrics work. And so it's important these games that Indiana will play, again, because they don't have Purdue's non-conference resume. They don't have, I don't think Butler's got the same non-conference resume, but even Butler's got a little bit more meat.
But KB, last year they had Auburn, Kansas, and UConn in their non-con, and Louisville, who ended up being terrible, obviously. Right. But I mean, that's a strong non-conference schedule.
Yeah, they weren't competitive in pretty much all of those games. Again, Louisville obviously didn't turn out to be anything, and then had too many of these close mid-major games. So just something to keep an eye on as Indiana gets underway coming up tonight at 8 o'clock. Again, we'll have Pacers coverage beginning an hour earlier than that. You'll find IU over on WIBC. Of course, Pacers and Magic tonight, 7 o'clock. We'll have Tony East join us here coming up in the 9 o'clock hour. What can they do at center? What should they do at center? Rick Carlisle acted like there was some hurdles to clear to make a move there, something I want to throw Tony's way coming up at 9.
I mean, they have to do something.
Yes. They do.
And it almost feels like they can't wait. You know what I'm saying? It's like, can you do something in the next couple weeks? Carlisle seemed like we want to do something, but we know we may have to wait closer to the trade deadline.
Yeah,
that's how he sounded yesterday.
It's a good thing that present-day NBA doesn't have as much reliance as the center.
No kidding.
That it used to, because you can survive a little bit of an Obi Toppin.
Everyone used to have a Zach Edey.
Right, yeah.
Now 2 teams have a Zach Edey.
It's like you don't necessarily, but again, you made up your roster with Isaiah Jackson and James Wiseman for a reason. So at some point, I think you do need to do that. I'm going to throw some things at Tony. Again, Stephen Holder going to join us here in a little over 10 minutes. No trade deadline move for the Colts yesterday. They are one of 7 teams that did not make any move. I said this to you, kind of open up the show. This has got to be maybe the quietest transactional offseason in the Chris Ballard era in terms of out-of-building moves. Literally, if you take away the draft, you're talking a claim for Samuel Womack, a Joe Flacco signing, and a Raekwon Davis signing. That is it. And so, again, when you act kind of in that manner, and then there's this directive of all of a sudden win now last week, it's just 2 very competing thoughts. And it's confusing in that manner. It's not necessarily too confusing in the manner of Ballard has never been super active from a transactional standpoint. But I would argue in, I guess, the most hot-seated year he's had as GM, he did very little outside of the building, no matter the month of year. March is free agency. I guess
and they had the money too.
There's a little bit more activity right before training camp starts. You see veterans sign.
They didn't do anything.
And then at the trade deadline, 25 teams make a move, and the Colts are not one of them.
Yeah, it's hard to hear if you're a Colts fan, and I know this will be the rhetoric from Ballard and others. Well, it takes 2. The other team, they have to want to move up, and that goes back to, you said this around the trade, not the trade deadline, but you said this in the offseason when free agency, especially when guys like Daniil Hunter, were being signed. It was like, Other teams always get to do it. You don't get to do it. It takes two. I understand, but other teams make the two-team trade work, and you don't. I don't necessarily blame him for this time around. Like I said earlier in the show, the problem with the Colts now is they're in the middle. They're not bad enough to start selling assets to where you can start moving guys who you're not going to have on the team next year, but you're also not bad enough. I mean, you're not. You're right there. You're the 8th seed. You're not bad enough to sell, but you're also not, I said that backwards, you're not good enough that you feel like you want to go get, players and have to worry about some contracts in the future. I think what is worrisome, maybe this is good for Stephen Holder as well. He had the reporting yesterday that Anthony Richardson, they were not listening to any offers on Anthony Richardson, and that's fair enough. I'm not surprised by that.
What would be a trade? What would be a realistic trade? If you had to say draft pick for Anthony Richardson, what round draft pick would be realistic?
Is it wrong if I said a 2 and a 6 or something like that, a 3 and a 5?
Gosh,
he's not a first round. You're not getting a first round pick. Are you even getting a second round pick?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't
asked
either.
The question and cop out. Like I think you're correct. I don't know. Second seems a little rich, but
yeah, but think about this, KB. If you're one of these, we did this yesterday. There's 8 or 9 teams that are going to need a quarterback. I mean, if you're sitting there and you're
and it's
you're
not
the
a
Saints
great
and
quarterback
Giants
draft
and
class,
Raiders,
theoretically.
yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of teams. So are you going to? I mean, this is the would you rather. You ever play that? This is the would you rather Wednesday.
Talking about a campfire.
There we go. It's a would you rather. Would you rather, maybe trade assets or sit there and get one of these quarterbacks? And probably for sure, if you're the majority of these teams, you're not going to get the top quarterback or maybe even the second quarterback on your list. Would you rather do that or use some draft capital towards a guy that has been in the NFL, has had some moments, but has also had some failures and has been benched? I think what is worrisome for me is the building of this team, while not bad, it's also not great. And so this thought process that this was a roster that was ready for the playoffs. Move the quarterback aside for a minute, KB, that the roster was ready for the postseason. And so Ballard doesn't do anything, and all these different data points where you can add talent tells me that, did he get that plan wrong? And then, I really wonder, and this is probably a bigger discussion, I really wonder if they had it to do over again, if they would sit Anthony Richardson for a while. Like now that they're armed with the data and, kind of the results of what has happened here, I wonder if they say, boy, I tell you, instead of playing him early, maybe if we would have sat him last year or sat him for the first month and a half of the season, because Steichen, last year and even this year, to get better, he's got to play. Well, what did he say last press conference? Oh, he can get better while being on the bench. I mean, they're talking out of both sides of their mouth. I wonder, that's the scary thing. If the plan for the roster and the plan for the quarterback doesn't work out, that's how you're drafting in the top 10 yet again.
One thing to note about Sunday, again, Josh Allen, the opponent here, first game ever inside of Lucas Oil Stadium for him. The Colts, and I brought this up before they played the Texans a couple weeks ago and C.J. Stroud. I'd argue maybe you throw Baker Mayfield into this, but over the last 13 and a half months, they haven't beaten one quality quarterback. I mean, the quarterback list is a joke.
Oh, yeah.
Of who they've beaten. Obviously, Josh Allen falls into a very, very high-level quarterback. Seemingly every year, even in this playoff rut that they're in, they've beaten this type of quarterback. Last year, it was Lamar Jackson early in the season. You go back to the horrible 2022 season, they beat Mahomes. You go back to 2021, they won at Buffalo. They beat Allen. I don't know if you consider Kyler Murray that, but they beat Kyler Murray. You go back to 2020, they beat several of them. Rodgers, I think, much more in his prime with Green Bay. Matthew Stafford, they beat Mahomes in 2019. So is this that? When or if is that game coming? Is that Sunday? Is it Jared Goff in a couple weeks? Like, does that game occur this season? That is a question that I would have coming up for Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, the Bills just played a close game against a bad team. To me, it's Buffalo. Who do we have on a couple days ago that thought this was a game they could just straight up win? Yeah, it was Joe Wright yesterday.
Joe was pretty adamant yesterday about it. Now, again, Buffalo has been a high turnover differential team.
Right.
They've been very good in the second half. Like you said, they were probably fortunate to beat Miami last week. But, boy, Allen is such a dynamic player. So, 4-point favorite, the Bills over the Colts in Week 10.
I don't think it's going to be the Lions. I have too much respect for the Lions with what they're doing right now to think the Colts could win that game. I might be wrong.
And, part of Joe's, I think, rationale is like at some point the Bills and the Lions look at this game and it just doesn't get them going.
Yeah, sure. And they just have a bad game. I mean, we saw it last year again with Baltimore.
So, when does that game occur? Does it occur? Because the Colts have done it each of these past few years, even when they had the really bad season in 2022. Is that coming on Sunday? All
right, coming up next, Stephen Holder, ESPN.com. He joins us. Appreciate you hanging out with us. Hour number 2 around the corner. It's Wednesday right here, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
It's the Wake Up Call with KB and Andy on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
All right, 8 o'clock hour here on this Wednesday morning. Colts back to practice today, back inside of Lucas Oil Stadium for the first time in a couple weeks. Coming up on Sunday will be the Buffalo Bills. Yesterday, the NFL trade deadline came and went. Colts one of 7 teams not to make a move. Our next guest, Stephen Holder from ESPN, was all over the Anthony Richardson side of things, making it very clear that the Colts were not entertaining calls on that end for a trade of Anthony Richardson. Stephen, Andy and I debated this in the 7 o'clock hour, and obviously it's a big hypothetical. Where would you even begin to gauge a trade package for Anthony Richardson? Like, if you had to throw out a draft pick or 2, what rounds would you label them?
Oh, man, that's so hard. I thought about it. I wasn't about to have the conversation publicly, but I'm glad you asked because it's going to force me to think more about this. I would say,
like Andy said, what'd you say, Andy? Second and a fifth,
yeah,
something like that.
I mean, I think that's the high end. Maybe a second and a fifth, or a second and a sixth, or maybe a third and a fifth, something like that. It can't be a first round pick, but you got to have some sort of draft capital involved to move him, I would imagine.
Look, it was almost like drafting him right now. If Anthony Richardson was in the draft right now, you know what I mean? Like, where would he get drafted? He might still be a first-round pick. I mean, later probably, but like, given the position, I'm not saying that they would reap a first-round pick in a hypothetical trade, because trades just, they're just harder to execute than an actual draft pick. But it would be very interesting. It would be, I would think definitely a high second and another pick for sure. Yes, I think that's very reasonable. I think you factor in age, you factor in the fact that we don't know a lot about him still. I mean, we're talking about 10 games. We don't know what he is. Let's be honest here. And the position, the inexperience, and therefore, he's still undefined as a player. And then just his physical ability, which is, significant. So I still think he'd be held in high regard if they were to move him. They're not moving him, obviously, but I agree with that.
Stephen, with yesterday's trade deadline, again, Ballard has never been, very active at the trade deadline one time and is now 8 years as GM. But, he is also one that has harped on roster building as a 12-month process. He said that quite often when people have referenced, hey, why don't you do anything in the early stages of free agency? Stephen, they've just completed, I would say, maybe the quietest transactional off-season, in-season, out of building roster moves in the entire Ballard era. Like, really, Samuel Womack, Joe Flacco, Raekwon Davis. Like, when you take the entire offseason and now all the way up to the trade deadline as a whole, does that surprise you at all? Again, Ballard has never been super active, but just 3 outside of the building moves? I mean, that's got to be the quietest of any team in the NFL this season.
It is a little surprising because I think in terms of where I was at the start of the offseason, I am a little surprised. And what I mean by that is I thought at the outset of the offseason, the internal position and the viewpoint internally for the Colts was, all right, we got a veteran team and we really believe in this quarterback. So I took that to mean, okay, well, you know what? Then you should probably act like you're a team that can compete. That didn't happen. But I think since then, I've come around a little bit, and I'm less surprised. And the reason for that is I do think Chris Ballard, he'll never say this, okay? He will never, ever say this. But I do think there's a good chance Chris Ballard looked at this and said, this is about finding out about the quarterback, and we got to see where we are. In other words, you can't just assume that he's a plug-and-play quarterback and he's going to go out there and you're going to win 10 or 12 games. I mean, that's a lot to assume against a harder schedule. And I think he actually kind of was prescient about that. Now, what I would say, though, is, of course, benching him flies in the face of all of that, and I think you completely have a muddled message, and I don't know what the hell they're doing. But all of that being said, if that was the opinion that kind of guided Chris Ballard this offseason, I get it to a degree. I think in his mind, and I'm not a mind reader, but I think just watching him execute things, I think it's fair to think that maybe he thought next year, when the quarterback had a year to grow, would be a year where they could maybe take a step. So, for example, last year, C.J. Stroud as a rookie, they certainly took steps in Houston. But coming into this season, they acted like this was the year. They had the quarterback they were convinced of. It was time to take the next step, and they acted accordingly with their offseason moves. Now, they have a lot of injuries, et cetera, whatever. But I'm just talking about how they governed themselves in the offseason. The Colts weren't there yet in terms of the quarterback because he didn't play enough last year.
Stephen Holder, ESPN.com with us here, Payless Liquors Hotline on this Wednesday. Stephen, I'm not even asking you to know this. Again, you're not a mind reader. You said that just a minute ago. It's more of a conversation piece that I wonder. Now that, and again, we're armed with some results here, which makes everything a little tricky. Do you think part of them wishes they had not played and started him at the very beginning, that their plan was different with Anthony Richardson? And again, I'm asking that knowing you're not a mind reader.
Well, I guess it's given them something to think about for sure. It's so hard to know. I still think that it's really hard to sit guys today. There's so much pressure, whether it's internal pressure from your owner. I'm not talking about Jim Irsay. I'm just talking generally speaking in these situations. Whether it's pressure from your owner, from your fans, whether it's pressure to get results if you're the head coach. You want to know what you have, and you have this shiny new toy. You want to see if you convince yourself that quarterback that you draft is the guy that's going to pull you out of this morass that you're in, right? And so, there's just so much invested in these young quarterbacks, unfairly so, that, it convinces people that maybe they're ready before they are ready. Now, I also do think that not all quarterbacks are created equal. Anthony Richardson is not C.J. Stroud in terms of his readiness for the NFL. Not even close, right? I still think he has a chance to be fine, but it was going to be rockier. And no one should be surprised by that, just given their experience levels. So, to answer your question, should they have done something different? I think there's an argument for it. I personally think had he not gotten hurt last year, this would have played out a lot differently. I think he was on a different trajectory. I think this year he came in and the rust is hard to overcome. I think that was a significant part of it. And just the interruption of that injury, I think derails everything. You got to start over. You're on the ground floor. And maybe he didn't quite understand that, Anthony. It's possible, right?
Sure.
That he didn't quite understand. Like, dude, you're not going to roll out of bed and just be that guy just because you think you are. It's hard, especially coming off an injury where you lost an entire offseason. He is too young and has played too little football for us to act like that doesn't matter. It matters a hell of a lot because he ain't played enough ball. So I just think, it's a recalibration for all of us to remember – who we're dealing with, what we're dealing with, and what all of these variables mean for a young player like Anthony Richardson.
Stephen Holder, you can find his work, of course, at ESPN, ESPN.com. He's with us here on the Payless Liquors Hotline. Stephen, what does Anthony Richardson need to do to get his job back? Or maybe is there anything he can do? It seems like so much of it is rooted in poor play from Joe Flacco. Like, more of what you saw Sunday night is going to be needed for Richardson to get back in the lineup in 2024. Do you think there's anything behind the scenes of, whatever, he's studying more, he looks sharper in his 3 practice reps? I really have no idea what Richardson could do behind the scenes to possibly get the job back outside of, again, Flacco having more of those Sunday night performances.
Well, and part of what is confusing for you and everyone else is that Shane Steichen just hasn't communicated this well, and that's part of the problem. And it's fine to be vague about things and be guarded and not give away a lot of information. But this isn't about winning on Sunday. This is an important situation, the most important situation facing the entire franchise. What is Anthony Richardson and what is his future? And you're kind of tiptoeing around, I think, direct answers. That's problematic, and it makes it hard for people to kind of digest. What are you asking us to? What are you telling us, right? So anyway, fair question for that reason. I think a lot of this, maybe this sounds hard to believe, but I really really believe from every conversation I've had that this has as much to do with off the field than on it. And when I say off the field, we know that Anthony Richardson is not some kind of problem kid or something. He's not, right? He's from everything we know, he's a wonderful young man, but he doesn't know what he doesn't know. Okay. And that's kind of the way I've been saying it for the past week. And what I mean by that is he doesn't understand, in large part, or didn't, I guess, understand, the gravity of that job and what it takes and what the expectations are. Some of it is optics, I think, in the building and just with the coaches. Do I think that matters all that much? Not to me, but maybe to coaches it does. I don't know. I think coaches have these expectations of what a quarterback's supposed to be, right? And how they're supposed to operate. And I don't think Anthony quite understood that. Where I think they fell short is not communicating that to him more directly. And now that it's been communicated, sure, but look at how they went about that. I don't know. I think there are questions there. So I think it's really just continuing to do that, show up more, be there earlier, be there late, do all the things that are required of you from a game planning perspective. And as you said, I think you laid it out. What's most important is, frankly, just let Joe Flacco do what he does. And if he self-destructs, I think that opens the door to Anthony. There's no question about it. I would say this, if they continue losing, which is certainly plausible. I mean, the Buffalo Bills are a really good football team, good defense. That's a tough game on Sunday. That could put them potentially at 4-6. If they have a few more losses here in the coming month, I mean, what's their record going into December? At that point, your entire logic for playing Joe Flacco, which was at least the public acknowledgement that you made, which was he gives us the best chance to win. Well, at that point, you can basically eat those words. So I think the question at that point would be like, why is he still playing? So we'll see what happens.
Stephen Holder with us from ESPN.com. It's a Wednesday on the Fan. This is just something that has irked me, and I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask you anyway. This is 4 different times Shane Steichen answering a question, a direct question from the media about Joe Flacco, has had to add on the back end right now. Well, he's our quarterback going forward right now. I don't know if that's a crutch or what's going on, if he's hedging. So if he does go back to Anthony Richardson, that he can say, well, I said that, Joe Flacco for just right now was the quarterback. Any theory on why he keeps saying that every time he's asked about Joe Flacco? They bench Anthony Richardson for Joe Flacco, and he keeps hedging his bet. Any idea?
Well, I think if you go back even to last week when this story unfolded, I don't think he's been direct in his terminology at all, even in talking about Joe Flacco being the quarterback going forward. I'm trying to remember what he said when he was asked directly, is this for the rest of the season? I can't remember what Shane Steichen actually said, but he has generally, or at least he initially kind of phrased it as, the foreseeable future or going forward. Going forward, it means like, that could be the next 2 hours or that could be the next 2 months. I mean, it is very nebulous language, right? I think that's intentional. You don't want to box yourself in. I mean, that's frankly smart because this does seem to be a little bit flying by the seat of your pants. Okay.
Yeah.
So you certainly don't want to make, proclamations. I do think, I don't know, I'm speculating here, but I think it's probably intentional because I mean, he's no dummy. I mean, he can look at the situation and see, like, all right, I mean, we're not talking about, 2013 Peyton Manning here. I mean, this is Joe Flacco, okay? So
right.
This may not go that well, and he has to know that. So I think he's smart enough, I hope, to realize that.
Again, Stephen Holder with us here from ESPN. We appreciate his time as always. Stephen, last one from me. I think it's unfortunate anytime you have to go down this path with a player, but I do find the question fair. With the news yesterday on Ryan Kelly heading to injured reserve, do you think we've seen the last of him either in a Colts uniform or certainly in a contract year? Could this be his final season here?
Yeah, I do think there's a chance he comes back from this injury this year, but that's kind of besides the point, I think. I think at this point you have to assume that he's probably on his last days as a Colt. And, that is unless they were to come to some kind of understanding that he would maybe take a lesser contract and he might have to come off the bench. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Like, what is he willing to do, right, to remain a Colts player? That would be the question for me. Because if he wants, a veteran, a starting veteran level contract, or if he wants to start, if those two things are must-haves, then you probably have to move on. I don't think there's even a conversation to have if you're the Colts. And I hate to say it, we love Ryan Kelly. I mean, you talk about a pro, a guy who I think has been, the consummate leader and always stands up and talks, win or lose, faces the music. I respect him so much. Okay, I really do. And he's been through like 6 iterations of this team in 9 years, which is amazing. But anyway, that is the harsh reality. No one knows that better than Ryan Kelly, who's an officer of the NFLPA. He knows the business better than anybody. So he can read the tea leaves. This isn't news to him. I think what you see is what everybody sees. That this is probably nearing its conclusion, and it's inevitable for every single player, but it doesn't make it any easier.
Longest tenured Colt, Kelly, 31 years old, again in a contract year this season. Colts get back to practice later today. Stephen Holder will have your coverage out there at West 56th Street. Stephen, thank you, sir.
All right, guys. Talk soon.
Stephen Holder right there on a Wednesday morning. I don't know if I had time. I guess we really didn't have time to get into this, and maybe it's a topic we can talk about here in the 8 o'clock hour, Andy, but you hear this win now approach from the Colts. What do you think is the best thing they do offensively?
That's such a great question. Well, with Anthony Richardson, it was dropping back and throwing the ball as far as he could. I would still say when they get the running game going, but they've had some issues with the running game.
Would the best win now thing be to run Richardson and Jonathan Taylor into the ground? Like, is that the best attribute to this football team? Flacco had the great start in Jacksonville, and then the Tennessee game, not great, and then obviously Sunday night, really not great. If you look at it, the 3 worst rushing performances of the season are all with Flacco as the starter. Is the best offensive item for win now, is it Anthony Richardson running like he is in college and it's pouring down rain and you're afraid to throw the ball 5 yards and then chuck it to Alec Pierce 3 times a game?
Like Notre Dame will run Riley Leonard and not worry about his body on a Saturday afternoon. Well, we've talked about this, yes. I mean, I didn't ask him this. We didn't have time, but Shane Steichen I would expect Anthony Richardson to have a few running packages or plays going forward. If not, to me, that's not using every tool in your toolbox. And you may be talking about playing him more. I'm talking about playing him some. Does that make sense? I just think if you have Joe Flacco out there and you're stinking on 3rd down, why not throw Anthony in there where he can run? He's not a running back. It's not the wildcat that Bill Belichick did. If you had to, he could throw the football, and he obviously can run. And if you did that 5 times a game, or you put the ball in the belly of Jonathan Taylor and he hung on this time. I mean, to me, why would you not do that? I mean, you're a 4-win football team right now. You're not in the playoffs. You're fighting for everything. Why not try something that's different than an 8-yard pass to Josh Downs?
Yeah, like what is the best thing for win now? Is it, do you feel like Flacco, obviously they feel like Flacco can get back to more, Jacksonville type games versus Tennessee or Minnesota, but I don't know. That's just a thought I've had when we've debated this, offensive move and exactly what does that unit do well. And I don't know, maybe.
Boy, it's not many things.
I mean, the interior rushing game has been poor, and I get that Taylor wasn't in the lineup for a couple of those Flacco starts, but even without Taylor, they have had, good rushing performances with Richardson. So I don't know, just something to note.
We're going to get to a morning check down here. We're going to do I Gotta Know coming up on the other end. I did want to throw this your way, something to think about that I thought, Stephen brought up. He's like, if you were trading for Anthony Richardson, it's almost like drafting Anthony Richardson, which it is for the most part. He has a little bit of experience, but obviously there has been some drama. And I'm just looking at, different mock drafts and big boards and everything else. Where would you have Anthony Richardson with this crop of quarterbacks? We can talk about that later. I'm trying to figure it out. Like, I would take Shedeur Sanders over Anthony Richardson. Like, using him as an example,
right.
I would take Sanders over Anthony Richardson.
I think there are some NFL people that think he's too stationary.
Yeah.
If you're going to look at his, which is kind of funny to say about Deion's son, but when you look at Richardson, someone reached out and said, "Wait, a first or a second for Richardson? There's no chance." Trey. I'm trying to think of like-minded deals. Trey Lance went for a fourth from San Francisco to Dallas. That was a little bit deeper into the Trey Lance.
Yeah, but he was seen as much more
contract.
of a bust than Anthony Richardson,
right.
in my opinion.
So, again, do you bump that up a round? Do you bump it up 2 rounds with Richardson? Like, would you get to the second round level? Would you? I can't go first.
No, absolutely
I'm probably
not.
more in the second or third camp.
And it might be more like a 3 or 4 and a 3 or 5. Everyone's saying, well, Justin Fields. Well, Justin Fields is getting ready to have his second contract in the NFL. So that is totally different. Plus, he played for, Mark what? He started for 3 years? Or played a lot for 3.5 years with Chicago. So, I don't know. I feel like you got more data on Justin Fields, right? He started games consistently in the NFL.
So, again, no trade deadline move for the Colts. They were one of 7 teams that did not make any. Pretty much everybody in the AFC of note did something. Houston would be one that didn't do anything, and obviously with the Stephon Diggs trade, I don't know, maybe Nico Collins could get back this week. They've got the Lions. That's a big game, Sunday Night Football, for them. I thought they'd be a little bit more active. And tomorrow night's a great Thursday night matchup. We'll get Cincinnati and Baltimore on Thursday Night Football. And again, if you are a Colts fan of them being a playoff team, you certainly, I think, want to cheer for Baltimore. Cincinnati's there, kind of in the just outside looking into the playoff picture. So you want to make sure that Baltimore runs away the AFC North and Cincinnati loses.
You ready to jump into a morning check down?
Let's do it.
All right, let's go.
The Morning Checkdown, brought to you by Marion University Football, pursuing another NAIA championship this season. Don't miss the on-campus action at Ascension St. Vincent Field. Visit NUnites.com for tickets.
All right, so we've talked a lot of Colts. Didn't do anything, obviously, at the trade deadline. Somewhat busy NFL trade deadline. It doesn't hit like some sports, though. Major League Baseball, NBA, whatever it may be. Speaking of the NBA, Pacers back in action tonight against the Orlando Magic. No Paolo Banchero, of course, who dropped 50 points. I looked this up, KB. Before he got injured, he was averaging 30 and 9. And 5 assists.
Oh, yeah.
Just ridiculous, the kind of year that he was.
He had fully arrived.
He truly had. So it's Pacers Magic tonight, 6:30. You'll hear it right on the Fan. Spread for this one currently at 6.5. It opened Pacers 5.5. It's moved up a point. Again, for the Pacers tonight, Andrew Nembhard is considered a game-time decision. We'll see if he plays. He played the last one. I would imagine he'd be out there. Aaron Nesmith out for this one. Again, tonight, 6:30 on the Fan.
Tony East going to join us in a bit. Talk more Pacers with him. All right, tonight down in Bloomington, it is Indiana, a 28.5 point favorite. Year 4 of the Mike Woodson era getting underway. It is SIU Edwardsville. This is just outside of St. Louis. Is that right?
Oh, is it? Okay. Yeah, I didn't look it up. I should have.
I know nothing.
I don't have. They're 29-point favorites.
They? Ohio Valley?
They're the Cougars. Oh, I have no idea. Yeah, I don't know. How many conferences have they played in probably in the last 5 years?
Say, they've probably been in 7 of them. I say this in all seriousness. That spread matters. Indiana too many times last year. Army comes to mind. Florida Gulf Coast comes to mind. They didn't beat these sorry teams enough. You need to do that when your non-conference resume doesn't have a lot of substance, and that certainly is true for Indiana this season. So we'll see how that goes. And last night, Indiana number 8 in the first college football rankings. 8th in the rankings, 9th in the bracket. That's because BYU is a Big 12 champ. They get one of the 4 byes there, and you really had no gripe with Indiana right there at 8, did you?
No, not really. You could say, well, maybe they should be up a spot or so. It's going to work itself out. To me, they got respect from the committee, and if they ever matched up against a team like Tennessee, I think they would have a chance to actually go on the road and win a game, which is crazy to even say. It's crazy.
It's the last time, I guess Kentucky might fall into this one. It's the last time IU's won a road game in the SEC.
Who's that now? Kentucky? Did you say?
Right. I'm sure IU at some point won at Kentucky, right?
Yeah,
when Kentucky was bad. But I'm like, first off, IU doesn't play a lot of road SEC games. But when's the last time you think they won one?
I have no idea. You tell me.
I have no idea.
No, I don't know. It's been a while.
But it's just funny. Again, I brought this up yesterday, like Kurt Signetti is talking about Michigan coming out there, a 2-touchdown favorite, and he says something effective like, yeah, last year the game wasn't very close. It's like they lost to Michigan by 45 last season.
It's unbelievable.
And now they're a 2-touchdown favorite over Michigan.
Mark Stoops, go ahead, sorry.
I mean, think about that's a 59-point differential from last season.
And he called his shot.
I mean, like, it is just amazing how big of a turnaround.
I was going to say with Kentucky, I know they've won. They've won at, who am I trying to think of? They won this year at Ole Miss, for instance, which hurts Ole Miss. Using them. I mean, but there's not too many. I forget the numbers on Mark Stoops, but his SEC record against winning teams is like 3-20. Like, it's something ridiculous. It's a pretty big number. So, all right, there's your morning check down. On the other end, we'll dive into the mind of Mark Dighton. I got to know. We'll do it next here. It's a Wednesday on the Fan.
It's the Wake Up Call with KB and Andy on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Andy, we went over the Colts free agent list yesterday for 2025, but just a reminder, and I think when the trade deadline comes and goes, there is a thought of, are there any in-house contract year guys that you would like to move because you don't view them as a re-sign candidate? Again, the Colts didn't do anything at the trade deadline, but barring a late season extension, which are pretty rare, these guys will hit free agency coming up in 2025. Joe Flacco, Mo Alley-Cox, Kylan Granson, Ryan Kelly, who went on injured reserve yesterday, Dayo Dengbo, EJ Speed, Julian Blackmon.
Are any of those? Who's back with the Colts, do you think?
I think
Dayo,
I think, is a definite re-sign guy.
Blackmon went out, tested the market, couldn't really find anything, came back and signed a one-year deal. You think he would do the same again? You think he's raised his play to where he can get a 3-year deal somewhere? I don't know.
Part of me thinks, what does the safety market look like?
I know.
You have asked him to take on a different role this season, than the strong safety role where he was more of a playmaker. I think we saw, look at Nick Cross this year. He's been around the ball a lot. I think when you're in that strong safety role, you're just around it a little bit more than the deep free safety. EJ Speed's an interesting one. He's a bit older. He's 29, which, I kind of forget that he falls a little bit on the older side. But Jalen Carlisle, you did draft in the 5th round. And I thought he had some promising moments before he got hurt. So I think those on defense would be interesting. I don't know. Do they view one of the tight ends you bring back? I don't know. That tight end position is just so blah.
I just can't believe they sit there and they look at us and they say, we love our tight end room. I'm sitting there saying, okay, maybe a better quarterback makes that look better. At times, Flacco has made that look better, but come on.
It has to be the fewest amount of catches of any tight end room in the league, right?
Oh, it has to. We did the numbers a couple weeks ago. I'll add them up during one of these breaks. Yeah, they're woefully low. I remember last game Granson had one the first play. Was it the first third down of the game? He had that 22-yarder.
He did.
Did they have another catch the entire game?
Like I said, they observed tight end day.
Yeah.
They didn't participate.
It's just crazy. If we go to Shane Steichen in Philadelphia had this. They've had a good tight end, above average tight end in Philly all these years.
So that was the only, not only was that the only tight end catch of the game, that was the only tight end target.
I don't think Drew Ogletree's had a catch in a month and a half.
Alley-Cox, Ogletree, Mallory, none of them with the target here. Yeah, so on the year.
Come on.
Who do you think your leading tight end catcher is? How many catches?
Oh, I'm going to go with Mo Alley-Cox. I'm going to go with 8 catches.
Boy, should have gone with that gut. 7 for Alley-Cox, 5 for Ogletree, 4 for Granson, 2 for Mallory. So add that up. 12 plus 6, 18 catches. Those are 3 games for Jack Doyle.
Well, Travis Kelce had 10 Monday night. He had 10 catches.
18 total catches for your tight end group. That's 2 a game. 9 games into it.
Well, they're all blocking tight ends. I think their tight ends have value.
But are they though? Mallory and Granson are not.
We were told they were. Well, Granson lost playing time. Last year he was catching the ball at a much higher clip. Didn't he have over 40 catches last year? I want to say.
Did he have that many?
I thought he did. Maybe I'm wrong. I'll add up the numbers because we did this 3 weeks ago when I was yelling and screaming about the tight ends.
So again, those notable Colts hitting free agency, scheduled to hit free agency coming up next year. All right, Mark Dykton, I got to know time.
He's got questions.
How about a game?
They've got answers.
Hey, I'm more of a cornhole man myself.
Sports, music, movies. What? High fashion.
That Hansel's so hot right now.
And everything in between.
You ever seen a foot with 4 toes?
It's time to get a glimpse into the mind of Mark Dykton.
Stop it, you're scaring me.
It's time for I Gotta Know.
Okay, you 2 punks, I want a good, clean fight. Let's get it on.
All right, boys. Anthony Richardson has started 10 games with the Colts. True or false? He will start 10 more games with them.
I like
Boy,
that.
That's a good
little
number.
True or false. I'm still going to say true, right? I think he gets next year to try to prove it. I think he gets a couple this year.
Where my initial thought was yes, I think so. But you know where I paused?
Okay, where did you pause?
Can he stay healthy? Like,
yeah, I'm thinking of trades and being benched and everything else.
that question
you're not wrong.
Our front burner lately, understandably. But, and again, this year, obviously he missed a couple of games. I guess he was, trending in a decent health direction here. Maybe he would have started 10 games this season. But, boy, that's a good number, Mark. 10 more games.
Okay, so if we think they may lose some games upcoming here, at the end of the year, you have Titans, Giants, and Jags. I don't know if you would say he starts all 3 of those, maybe 2 of them. So if you got 2, then you would only need 8 more games or 7 more games in a Colts uniform. And I do think he will have a chance next year, and we'll go through the Anthony Richardson debate next season, too. So that's why I'm going to say true.
Well, I'll say true, but I'm not very confident.
Yeah, neither am I.
You're right at the 10 number, probably.
That's a good number.
Yeah.
That's a good number.
It is a good number. Yeah. I mean, Bryce Young got a hair over 20, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I'll go. Boy, I will say true, but I'd like to bet on it with your money, not mine.
No, thank you. Your level of concern for Tyrese Halliburton's early season struggles.
I'm going to go with little. I thought Rick Carlisle prefaced it pretty well yesterday of maybe we shouldn't have those grand, crazy. I mean, it was stupid numbers he was doing last year, 27-12, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe we dial that back a bit. But I did like the other night that he got in the lane. I mean, he was 8 for 8 on 2-point shots. And I just think he will shoot it a little bit better. So I think if we just tone back maybe the first-team All-NBA numbers that he was putting up at some points of last season, I still think he can play at an all-star level for you.
Yeah, I found it interesting. One thing Carlisle did say yesterday, and again, if you missed that, go to the podcast center, 1075thefan.com. He mentioned, did Carlisle, that, last year at the beginning of the year, you have to remember, A, Halliburton came out of nowhere. B, they did not have Pascal Siakam yet, another superstar, big-time player, all-star level player. And then C, they were a little bit of a smaller, faster team early on in the season, and all that goes into maybe taking some teams by surprise. So instead of averaging 26 and 13 assists a game, maybe it's going to be a little bit more. With that being said, he's averaging 15 points a game. That's not going to be enough. He will have to get that up, in my estimation, still to 20, 21. The thing, and I know they shoot a lot of threes, and it's the NBA. He's shooting 24% from 3.
Right.
I just like when he gets in the lane. I think Halliburton's a better player than a step-back 30-footer.
24% is not. I mean, that's not going to last, right? I mean, that's never been him.
No.
I mean, that wasn't him in college.
No.
And I know volume's different. That wasn't him in Sacramento. He's always been able to do that really, really well. So that's why I don't think.
I just don't want him to always have to settle for that.
Sure. And that's why I think he was so effective on Monday night.
Agreed.
I mean, to get into the lane. I did think this is something we didn't have a chance to get to Rick Carlisle with when he joined us yesterday, but a little wrinkle they did late in that game. They went zone.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was an interesting, smart move, because when you think of Luka and Kyrie, how many times do they just sit there and pluck out the worst defender and say, hey, come bring a screen my way,
right?
And I'm going to get that guy lined up on me. The Pacers kind of avoided that. They had Halliburton down low on that 2-3. I think it was Nembhard and Mathurin up top. And I just thought that was a little bit of a wrinkle that helped in that area last year.
Yeah, they had zone, and then they had zone played against them. It was like college basketball the other night. All right, what do we got, Mark?
I had more, but we're up against the clock, so we're gonna call it there, I think.
Okay.
Tony East joining us here coming up at 9. So I'm going to talk about Tony again. What exactly will they do center-wise? Rick Carlisle hinted at there are some limitations right now, what they can do. Tony will be the perfect person to ask. And Zach Osterman at 9:30. We'll go both. We'll go football and basketball with him as college football rankings are out for Indiana. And also opening night on the hardwood. What's the baseline? What's the expectation? Is it single-digit seed? Is it second weekend of the tournament? What should year 4 for Mike Woodson look like?
It's funny with Zach Osterman. He's always had to kind of write about football, but never have to really write about football. And now
he's a perfect person to ask.
I know, and now he's really having to write about football. So we'll talk with him coming up in the 9 o'clock hour. Some IU basketball discussion. Plus, I thought it was interesting. Stephen Holder mentioned if you're drafting Anthony Richardson in this draft, who would you take him over? Who would, obviously you not take him over? So we can discuss that as well. Appreciate you hanging out with us. It's a Wednesday, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
It's the Wake Up Call with KB and Andy on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Colts back to practice today. It will be the Buffalo Bills inside of Lucas Oil Stadium coming up here on Sunday. I believe first time the Bills have played inside of Lucas Oil since 2018. That game Josh Allen is actually hurt for, started, I believe, by Derek Anderson. You needed a throwback on that one. Didn't Derek Anderson lead the Browns to a 10-win season one year?
He did. You know the jerseys of the Browns fans where they have every name of the quarterback since they've,
iconic.
Yeah, it is iconic.
Those are wedding dress long.
The thing is, Derek Anderson's one of the best ones on that list.
Easily.
He might be the best one on that list at times. Are we expecting, I know we had this with the Bears and a little bit with the Steelers, definitely Chicago. Are there going to be Bills fans going through a table?
Yeah, Mafia is everywhere.
But are they going? Will tables be broken? Is what I'm asking outside Lucas Oil on Sunday afternoon.
I don't know if we'll have the quantity of what we had with Pittsburgh and Chicago, but I do think you'll have a good amount. Is there a higher risk reward player in the NFL than Josh Allen? I watch him.
I would say no. I mean, Mahomes has some of that because he's a gunslinger, but I feel like Allen has more of that, probably.
I feel like Allen is in more moments where if you freeze framed it and was like, what do you think happens here? You'd have half.
That's a great point.
Which, today's the perfect day to say this. You'd have half the country voting one way and half the country voting the other. I mean, you would literally say, turnover.
Yeah.
No, 38-yard pass. And I think back to that playoff game, and it was the COVID year. The Colts were in Buffalo for that wild card round. And Allen, I mean, that was still kind of early Allen. Had he, truly arrived yet? And he made, I would say, a handful of those plays where literally the Colts had him wrapped up near the sideline, staring a 15-yard loss at it, and next thing you know, he throws it to Gabe Davis, toe tap on the sideline, and it's a 38-yard gain. To me, there's no player in the NFL that is at that level of risk-reward than him, and seemingly he always finds the reward.
Well, I mean, you mentioned him throwing the ball. He also is the kind of guy that can run, that can have big runs, and then
he extends. He spreads you out.
If you're Nick Cross or Julian Blackmon, he also might lower his head, and he might try to run you over, Kenny Moore.
When I say risk, I mean turnover risk as much as injury risk and how many hits he takes on. I mean, He's a reckless runner.
Yeah, because Lamar Jackson's Lamar runs a lot, but he's not that. Jalen Hurts runs, but I don't feel like there is the, oh my God, what's going to happen here? Like, I kind of feel like with Lamar, he's going to make a play. Now, this is not totally what you were looking for, but a much lesser degree on a guy where I never know what's going to happen. You could throw in Jameis Winston. 2 weeks ago, it was very good for Jameis Winston, and last week he was throwing the ball to the Chargers.
And if I wanted to, I could throw in Carson Wentz.
I was throw in Carson. Yeah.
I was trying to harp on the reward elements,
or the really good players in the league. Yeah,
17
touchdowns,
top-line
starters,
and 2 picks for Josh Allen this season. Again, Colts a 4-point underdog coming up on Sunday in Week 10.
All right, I have a dad dilemma. Hit the open here. Let's go, Mark.
Hi, Daddy.
Oh, the guys have another dad dilemma on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
All right, so both of you are going to be able to help me out with this one. It's the age-old. I think you guys may know where I'm going with this. So we had the time change. So what happens on the time change? The kids are up earlier. The naps are all thrown off. He is an absolute demon at night because he hasn't had the appropriate naps. Is there anything I can do? Do they get used to it? Am I just basically screwed? I need to know because it hasn't been bad, but, you start to get a little bit later in the night. Usually he's fine, and the schedule is completely destroyed at this point. What do I do?
Time cures all.
Car rides.
See, car rides to me are difficult because car rides, it's like, all right, so little gas falls asleep. Is he going to transfer well?
Well, we don't have trouble him going to sleep, but it's more his naps are off. He's waking up earlier. He's tired earlier. So the schedules, it's like, do we need to eat dinner at 6 o'clock? I mean, what are we doing here?
So this is where Maddie Bowen would disagree with me. Again, I think it's depressing as hell at 5:15 at night that it's dark outside.
It's terrible.
But she is the one taking on, obviously, the entire brunt of the morning. She likes that they will get up at a decent morning hour and, they're kind of ready to go for drop-off. Then at night, it's dark earlier, so you don't have the hey, why is it sunny outside? Don't tell me that I need to go to bed at this hour. Which I
Gotcha.
I think she is right.
Yeah.
So I think daylight, albeit there's a difficult adjustment, certainly here early on, I think once you get over it, it's worth it.
But they do get over it.
Yeah.
So it'll even out.
It shall pass.
It shall pass. It may take a couple weeks, but it shall pass. Okay.
And then you'll spring ahead, and it'll go out of whack again.
Another excellent thing that, and shout out to my wife for this, another excellent thing, what do you do with all the Halloween candy?
Oh, I don't even talk about it. I ate so many Reese's
we have
yesterday.
At our house
New neighbors
still.
next door. So what do?
You've mentioned it. You made him a little gift basket?
Halloween candy cookies. So the cookies have the Halloween candy in them.
That's a great idea.
You just cut the bucket right in half. Perfect.
Man.
Perfect.
That's a great idea.
Rosie loves it. Max loves it. They're making cookies. This is great. And next thing you know, they've disappeared and they'll never see them again.
That's great.
Awesome.
So are the neighbors right next door to you, or are they? Oh, well, how about that?
Zach, big old Bengals fan.
Okay. Well, that's good. I mean, you get new
He's ready for
neighbors.
Thursday night.
You never know. If you had great neighbors, you get a new neighbor, and you're scared to death. Is this guy going to be a jackass or what?
Mark, do you have any good Halloween candy tricks?
Boy, that's a good idea.
Not really. Just kind of
slowly
start
eat them all yourself, and you'll be
either
good.
that, or you start slowly throwing stuff where you're like, okay, how many Tootsie Rolls do we really need in this house?
Well, the worst part is they're all in these bite-sized small helpings. So you're like, oh, that's just one small fill in the blank, and then you have 3 of them.
I know.
And then you have 4 of them.
Yeah, last night I had 2 of the mini Reese's and 1 of the mini M&Ms.
Yeah, bingo.
And
bingo. It's
that's
exactly
been a daily occurrence since last Thursday.
Yeah, I mean, we have bags and bags. We just have too much. I got nervous Halloween day and I'm like, honey, I don't know if we have enough. I don't know why I'm doing this. And thank God, we actually did need a little bit more, but I went and I got, 2-3 things, and some of it was already on sale, but a lot of the stuff I got is sitting, in the basement, which is eventually, you have a beer at night, you have a bourbon at night, especially if you're watching TV last night, and, you crush about 5 Kit Kats.
Now, when you reference last night on TV, you're referencing
college football playoff, obviously.
Shout out to Matt
Davis.
He tweeted us a picture of him in the stands.
Oh, my God. Good for him.
At, Schumann Field. I'm trying to even think what his name there in Muncie. Tough loss for the Cardinals there.
Yeah, they're what now? 3-6 on the season. I need to look that up.
Weather
they are 3-6.
Miserable last night there.
I mean, the Macs got to bring more. Bowling Green 23-13 over Central Michigan, and the game last night at Ball State was 27-21. I mean, don't MAC games usually have a lot of scoring and something crazy happens at the end? Neither one of these games had it. Come on, Mac, you're on. There's nothing else on. Let's go. It's a
Usually you
Tuesday.
get the pick six. The guy's returning it for a touchdown, then he fumbles it at the 2-yard line or something. Do we love college football rankings? Do you love Boise at Ohio State? Because that. Is that something that?
Oh, because if Ryan Day loses, it'll be funny.
We'll get you going.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, I love all these games.
Because that's the closest thing. We will get this with the Power 5, getting one bid. We're going to get this annually. You'll get the closest thing to Cinderella in the NCAA tournament. I don't think it's at the same level, but whether it's Boise this year, I'm trying to think who are the others up there. I guess Army. If they were
Coastal Carolina for a couple years, remember they had a pretty good team.
I felt like last year, JMU with Signetti.
Sure.
We are going to get that. And, Boise, again, they probably fall on more of the Gonzaga side of a mid-major. But, man, can you imagine Army at Ohio State and they upset them? Now, I shouldn't say that because Army can upset Notre Dame here in a few weeks.
I was about to say, settle down, big guy.
But, oh, boy.
That
gets me feeling a little hot and bothered.
These campus, the first round, these campuses.
I want the quarterfinals to be on campus, too.
I know. You got to pay the piper, though. You got to pay the bowl guys. The bowl executives got to be able to fly around on private jets and have, lobster tail.
And with last night's rankings, again, Indiana 8, Notre Dame 10, I think that matchup is still possible. If you look at it and let's say Indiana loses a close game to Ohio State, maybe they drop to 9 in eventual rankings and Notre Dame wins out, maybe they go to 8 and all of a sudden a South Bend. Gosh, there'd be so many IU fans there.
If I'm a Notre Dame fan, I don't want to face IU just because of the jokes and losing to IU. I'd rather just lose to Georgia. Just give me Georgia and I'll just lose to Kirby Smart.
That's one of the saddest fan statements you could make. And me as a Notre Dame fan sitting right here, you could not be more right.
I know. You don't want to lose to them. Lose to anybody else.
No. Happy Valley, Austin, Athens, wherever.
Sure. Because your fan base won't crush as much if you lose to Kurt Signetti.
What a pathetic statement to make.
Oh, and Signetti will do, we own the state. They beat Purdue and they beat you. Anyway, let's take a break. Coming up on the other side.
This day's ruined now that you just said that.
It really is.
I'm going to think about that for the rest of the month.
I have to go eat a bunch of Kit Kats tonight left over. Tony East, what next? Obviously, a big game tonight against Orlando. What does he make of the first couple weeks of the season? Tony East, he joins us next. 9 o'clock hour right here on The Fan.
It's the Wake Up Call with KB and Andy on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Always feel further educated. Thanks to our next guest. He is the great Tony East, Locked On Pacers, a must-listen here. And Tony joins us as the Pacers get ready for the Magic tonight inside of Gamebridge. Fieldhouse again, no Paolo Banchero, 6.5-point favorite, the Pacers in this one. And I guess we do have to compliment Tony, don't we?
For what? Well, I mean, sure, I'll compliment Tony. I like Tony East, but for what?
Said this about Tony before. 31 NFL teams he knows absolutely nothing about, but he is a Vikings fan.
That's right, he
Tony
is.
East,
big Sam Darnold guy.
Congrats to your skull on Sunday night.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the 0 snaps I watched of the game, and I think the big takeaway from that game is that the Colts scored 13 points with their new high-powered offense and quarterbacks, right?
Well, what were you doing Sunday night to where you watched 0 snaps of the game? Come on, Tony.
I've learned a lot about the Colts from coverage of the Colts. Can I ask Colts questions, or do I only have to do Pacers stuff here?
Yes, you can ask Colts question, although I'm a hair nervous.
I promise it's a good question, I think. I heard a lot in the offseason about that they don't have a lot of defensive talent, and then when their defense wasn't good, everybody thought it was the coordinator's fault, and I thought that was really confusing. Is that a stupid thought?
Yeah, they've invested a lot defensively in their front seven, and I think there are some questions about just like how great some of that talent is, and then also schematically they feel like they're too vanilla. Like, you have a very diverse defensive coordinator. He's exotic, he blitzes, he does all that stuff. The Colts do not, and so I think there are people on both sides of it. Some people think some of the defensive personnel is overrated, but mostly they don't like that Gus Bradley was 28th in points allowed each of the last 2 years. They've definitely been better in that area this season, but still, I would call them a very average defense.
Yeah, Tony, they're vanilla on defense, and the back end of that defense, they probably could have strengthened just a little bit before the season. Like, one of their starting corners is a guy they picked up from San Francisco, who got cut, who was a free agent right before the season. He ended up fitting in, and now is one of their players who's playing a lot of snaps for them on defense, and he just arrived.
Oh, okay, that does make sense to me. I obviously don't know like what scheme they run, what they're even trying to do. That was very interesting to me because I was like, didn't everybody kill them for not getting like half of the available secondary players? Now that they gave up 35 to the Jaguars, it's suddenly the coordinator's fault. But if they were doing admittedly very basic and vanilla things, that would answer my question.
We'll transition now to the Pacers here. Tony East with us on the Payless Liquors hotline. Tony, we had Rick Carlisle on yesterday in the 9 o'clock hour, and he said something to the effect of, it's not the easiest time for those transactions when asked about finding depth at center. It is kind of wild to me. They haven't done anything at center here over the last handful of days, but I fully admit I know very little about NBA acquisitions in terms of what exactly timelines look like for making free agent moves, trades, etc. Could you enlighten us, maybe dumb it down a little bit on what Rick was meaning by that?
Yeah, the trade part's the hardest part, right? Like, it seems so natural to want, if you're, hoping for them to add a center, like someone on a roster is better than a free agent in theory, but a lot of the players in the league can't be traded, right? They can't be traded if they sign in the offseason to a new team or not using bird rights. They can't be traded till December 15th. So like James Wiseman can't be traded till December 15th. And if they signed using early bird or bird rights in the offseason, they can't be traded till January 15th, right? So it's really hard to get a lot of players who are available anyway. And a lot of teams don't want to trade this early in the season, right? Like, they made plans for what they thought the season would look like with the roster they built in mind. Like, it's not like they're all of a sudden going to pivot off that just because the poor Pacers had 2 Achilles tears in the first 6 games of the season, right? So the only way a trade would be possible now is if it was a player who was probably available before the season anyway, and that's really hard to come up with at this time. So that's why transactionally it's really hard to just stab your fingers and get a decent center who'd actually play right now, which is why I thought if they did add somebody, it would be a free agent that they could get just kind of on a non-guaranteed deal. And even that's kind of a hard timing-wise portion too, because a lot of those guys made decisions. Okay, they didn't think they'd be in the NBA this year, so they went and signed in Europe. Boban Marjanovic did that. Chimezie Metu did that. So there are options, obviously. I think they probably should. I still think they probably really need to do something. That they obviously got by in Dallas, but they're foul trouble or an ankle injury away from scary times at center. But it is hard to get someone right now outside of very limited options that players that either aren't good on both ends or don't fit their system. It's really tough right now.
Tony East with us here on the Payless Liquors hotline. Tony, let's go right there. You mentioned being, a rolled ankle from being like, hey, what are we exactly going to do here? Now, I like when they go small ball and Obi Toppin can play that position and they can have more guards and wings and shoot more threes and everything else. But I know not everyone has a traditional center, but it feels like this is going to catch up with them and hurt them here. Is that sooner rather than later? What do you think the actual fallout is for not having anyone truly behind Miles Turner is going to be?
Yeah, and matchup-wise is where it gets tricky, too. Like, they played Dallas, and Dallas was out without Derek Lively, and Daniel Gafford had a bad game, which is pretty rare for him. He's pretty rock solid in the regular season, and so they were really able to go small in a game like that, where like Najee Marshall played center at times, and P.J. Washington was the center at times. Like, okay, you can play Obi Toppin at the 5 against that team, no problem. I feel pretty good about it. And of course, Miles Turner had the best game of his season by far. So that kind of made it look like the center rotation they had was really good. And I still think even if they add a center, they could probably get away with Toppin as the backup a lot of nights. But what we saw in the postseason kind of applies here, right? In the first round against the Bucks, who had no real threatening backup 5 behind Brook Lopez, the Pacers went small a lot in that series. They played Obi at the 5 with Siakam as the bench front court and didn't play Jalen Smith or Isaiah Jackson much at all. And as soon as they played the Knicks, who had real size behind Isaiah Hartenstein and had a center on the court at all times, they played Isaiah Jackson a lot in that series, right? When they played the Celtics, they played Isaiah Jackson a lot in that series. And so now they don't have Isaiah Jackson. And so when they play a team with some size like tonight, they play Orlando, right? Orlando has Goga back. They have a lot of centers, right? Can they get away with small ball 5 successfully against a team like that? One is a question worth asking. And the second part of it is, okay, they're playing a team with size now. What if Miles Turner has 3 fouls in the first half?
I know.
Right? Who is playing center instead when Toppin's not out there? You know, they haven't gone to Walker Siakam yet. Maybe that's what they squint and say is the front court that could do something, but that is when they'll need someone, right? So they played the Mavs and looked fine, completely fine on both ends with what they had, but I think as soon as they play someone either with size or that stresses them in some ways in the front court, they'll go, okay, yeah, we probably need someone, even if it's just for 10 minutes a game.
Kenny, Tony East, you can follow his work is it still T East NBA? I probably should have double checked.
No, Tony R. East. We have retired the NBA in the handle days.
Tony R. East certainly does fever coverage as well. And again, Locked On Pacers is a must there. Rick Carlisle used the phrase, it's not been easy for Tyrese Halliburton this season. In what ways, again, I thought he was certainly outstanding and going 8 for 8 inside the arc the other night. In what ways have you seen it not be easy for the Pacers star?
Shooting would be the obvious point. I mean,
and would you call that just like missing open shots, or would you call that highly contested?
Yeah, he has I think in the third quarter of the who did they play last Friday? Like the Pelicans game, right? He took 2 threes that I thought, man, he's really trying to get going, right? He's had a couple games where he started cold and he could not get going. He just takes 1 or 2 threes that I thought, why did he take that? And I think the answer is that he wants to see one go through and feel better about what's going on, right? That has been the biggest, by far, difference between the Halliburton of the past and the Halliburton of right now is shooting. And maybe the 7-game slump, he had a really crazy, 10 to 15 game slump last March, as everybody remembers very well, right? But it kind of is, people have been calling it a continuation from last season. I can't go that far because he was good shooting in the playoffs, but it has been concerning that for a better part of the calendar year 2024, he has not shot well from 3, and that's completely changed to as a player because he was great in Dallas, but he had to make all of his 2s to do that, right? He has to really change his shot diet or where he's making shots from to have nights where he's the guy from last year who can score 20 points. He's only scored 20 points twice this whole season. He was 20 and 10 per game last year, right? So that's been a big shift for him, and I think this has changed for him recently since the Orlando Magic game, I think, but it went away in New Orleans. But the way he's approaching his drives, I think, has been a little interesting to me. He's passing more on drives than he did last season, which he's a great passer. I don't think we should doubt his decision-making, but he's such an efficient play finisher inside the arc. You just mentioned going 8 for 8 in Dallas that he's got to shoot more on drives. He's got to look at the rim more. The defense needs to at least thinking about the fact that he might actually try to shoot and score. And look what happens when that clicks like it did against the Mavs. So that's going to kind of been a shift. I think it's like 6% more of his drives this season that he's passing out of than last year. I don't know if that's a concerted effort or what the deal is. And maybe we're nitpicking. He's had 4 double-doubles in a row with points and assists. They look a lot better since last Monday when they played the Magic. But he's got to get the 3 going. He's got to start looking like himself as a scorer because eventually teams are going to defend him a little differently if that doesn't happen.
How much should we care? How much do Pacer fans care if Benedict Mathurin or Aaron Nesmith is the starting 3?
Honestly, I think my response to that would be I think it matters who closes the game, right? Because that's more indicative of who played well that night, too. Like, Mathurin's fourth quarters this year have been ridiculous. Like, he can't miss. He's shooting like 70% in fourth quarters. And those are the games he always earns that time, right? Like the games he doesn't play in the fourth, outside of the Knicks game because they just got completely rocked that night, like he earned the playing time by defending well or doing something particularly well to get on the floor in the fourth. And, my commentary about him starting has not ever been about his talent. It's always been about fit, right? If he could shoot better, be more efficient, or defend better to the point that he fits with that starting group better than one of Nesmith or Nembhard, that he should do it. And he's been insanely efficient this year because he's finishing well at the rim and his defense looks a little better and his decision-making looks a little better. So maybe he should. In fact, the starting lineup with him in there instead of Nesmith has been better in the small sample that we've seen so far this year. But I think the real important discussion is about closing because his game, if he's playing like he has this season, caters really well to clutch settings, right? And he's been really good in fourth quarters this year. So in closing lineups right now, yeah, I think the answer certainly is Ben Mathurin's out there. In terms of starting games, if the starters don't click pretty soon, I think they have to consider it because it's been better. I'm not sure it matters a ton, but the bench hasn't totally started flying either like last year. So, yeah, maybe that change could help everybody involved. And Mathurin's been awesome in these fourth quarters, which is why that group has looked so threatening with that one switch.
Tony East with us here on The Fan. Last one for me, Tony. Just big picture Eastern Conference. It's so early. Again, game number 8 coming up for the Pacers tonight. They're 3-4. For me, you look at Philly at the bottom at 1-5, and whatever the hell's going on with the Bucks right now with Giannis at 1-6, and then obviously such a great start for Cleveland. Even Brooklyn's 4-4, which I guess is a little bit of a surprise. To you look at the Eastern Conference. What has stood out to you in the first couple weeks?
Yeah, my sign to stop taking the standings seriously will be when the Nets aren't a top 4 team in the East. That is when you can officially look at the standings and say they reflect the East. The Cavs and Bucks are both standout things for obviously very opposite reasons. The Cavs look incredible. I mean, all 4 of their stars are connected. Evan Mobley's making awesome passes from the nail, and Darius Garland looks like the all-star Darius Garland. So they always have 2 all-star level talents on the floor now between Allen, Mitchell, and Garland. That doesn't even count what Evan Mobley can do on both ends. They look really legit, and their schedule's not super hard until they play the Celtics, like in the middle of the month. There's a chance they start almost 11, 12-0. It's not an easy schedule, but I mean they look really good on both ends for 48 minutes. I think they could end up being the 2 seed in the East if they keep this up this year because they never have a weak lineup on the floor, a weak group. Their bench has played really well. Kenny Atkinson's got that team humming. On the other side, the Bucks, like Giannis looks amazing, and no one else does. I mean, their second most athletic player would be any of us if we signed with the Bucks later today. Like they are just so slow and it's so uninspiring.
Take a shot at Pat Connaughton, Notre Dame legend.
Well, yes, but Pat Connaughton used to have a ton of juice, right? And like he totally doesn't anymore. And we saw that in the playoffs last year in Pacers Bucks. He is none of that anymore. Bobby Portis has taken a hit there. All these guys are like, yeah, Gary Trent's kind of athletic, I guess. I mean, it's just.
Oh, Giannis wants out of there. Giannis has gone, well, if we keep playing bad, they might trade me. That's him being nice and saying, I don't want to be an AH about this. Please trade me. Yeah, send me somewhere.
This really snuck through, but Jake Fisher reported right before the season that the Bucks were looking to trade Marjon Beauchamp so they could sign Giannis's brother, which is like a small thing. But Giannis's brother's out for the year. Like they only want to do that to appease their star. Like I don't think he's like thrilled though if that's something they're actually trying to do. So they look bad. The vibes are bad. The Pacers apparently just completely changed the course of their franchise by beating them 9 times last season in various settings. They look terrible. I get it. They don't have Chris Middleton, but like he doesn't take them from 1-6.
No.
They have the worst record in the NBA right now. Like he doesn't take them from 1-6 to looking really good. It's been really strange.
I feel like I could beat Giannis's brother one-on-one.
Well, now you can. Didn't he tear his ACL or something?
But even healthy, I probably have to bring him away from the basket, though. He looks like he's got some physicality to him. The great Tony East tonight, Pacers Magic. Again, 6.5-point favorite inside of Gainbridge Fieldhouse. No Paulo Banchero for
Is that really the line?
Yeah.
Right?
The Pacers are playing a team.
It opened at 5.5.
The Pacers are playing a team without their best player. It should be Magic minus like 15.5, right?
I know. I'm like, boy, doesn't this have like 76ers
home
opener written all over it? I'm like, this is a game. I mean, Orlando scored 85 and 86 the last 2 games. Like,
yeah. They're going to shoot 60% from 3 tonight, and
Gary Harris is going to have 21 in his homecoming game here. Tony, as always, sir, great stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Tony's Payless Liquors hotline.
I want to react to one thing there. Tony East mentioned this, and he's right, but I think the majority of people probably, it's semantics, but disagree. It does matter with Benedict Matherin and Aaron Neesmith. Well, you ride the hot hand, sure. It matters who's closing more than who's starting. But in the end, the starter is the starter, and a lot of times the starter gets more minutes.
Well,
so we all want to see Benedict Matherin beat the starter. That's how I feel.
Yeah, now I've heard Tony discuss this before, and I think he kind of mentioned it there of Matherin is really well suited for that second unit because he can be a little bit more ball dominant too.
Sure.
So, you can stagger those.
Sure, you can.
You can take him out very early so he gets back into the second unit, or you can leave him in there longer. They've done a nice job this year of staggering, Siakam and Halliburton, I think, with that second unit more than I remember. It hasn't been like, the true, kind of, hey, here's our full five-man second unit out on the floor. But again, minutes have just been so odd here with all the injuries that they've dealt with. Again, no Aaron Neesmith. Rick Carlisle was like all over the place, I think, in describing Neesmith's health situation yesterday. At one point, he's like, feel like he could be back soon. The next point, we don't really know the status.
And he's like, well, it's good if there's no surgery. It's like, oh, so maybe surgery was talked about a couple days ago. He made it sound like he could be back in 2 or 3 weeks, or he could be back in 2 or 3 days.
Right. Now, ruled out yesterday,
already,
for the game tonight. They play, Friday in Charlotte, and then Sunday it's a 5 o'clock tip here against the Knicks. So it's one of those Colts Pacers home weekends. You will have Colts and Bills at 1 o'clock over at Lucas Oil, of course. And then at Gainbridge Fieldhouse at 5 o'clock, it will be Pacers and Knicks.
Now, that's the true doubleheader. That's not the 3 o'clock that we got with Philly. That's not
a great, if
that's
you want
perfect.
For viewing experiences, that is an outstanding Sunday right there to get a little Bills action, and then you get the hated Knicks in the building.
Well, I don't want to, sometimes you can ask for too much. I don't want to be selfish, but it'd be nice if that game, instead of being at 5 o'clock, was at 6 o'clock. You get a little bit more of a bumper between 4 o'clock and the start of the NBA game. Yeah. Plus, then the NBA game carries you to Sunday Night Football. It's over at 8:15. You go right from the Colts. You go right from the FanDuel Sports Network, and you go right to NBC.
Yeah, and it's like kid witching hour. I just don't love the old 5 o'clock on a Sunday tip, but, that's me on that end. By the way, if you're looking for something to do today, I was informed of this. Okay. So Butler, we had Austin Parkinson, their women's coach, on back during Purdue's run. Of course, that name certainly in Purdue circles, and did a hell of a job at IUPUI, and now is over at Butler with their women's program. They've got their home opener today, 11 a.m. tip time. Free admission.
Oh, okay. Wow, 11 a.m. All right, let's
go.
Free
admission right there. A little Kids Day action.
Okay.
Sit inside of Hinkle Fieldhouse. So if you're looking for something to do here on this Wednesday, they do host Indiana. Actually, I do like. I feel like in the women's game you see more of this, of the bigger program teams going to the smaller schools in their state, but providing obviously a ton of crowd there for those teams. Indiana will play at Hinkle on the women's side of it coming up a week from tonight. But today, again, 11 a.m. over at Hinkle. Kids Day, free.
Chicago State. Yeah, Chicago State's in town. What are they?
There you go.
The Cougars.
I feel like they've been in 37 conferences. And at one point, it was IUPUI's only win one year.
Was it?
I could be wrong on that.
Man, conferences have moved so much. I have lost complete track. The average sports fan, I feel like, could probably, once you get past the SEC and the Big 12, maybe even the Big 12 would trip some people up. I don't know.
If you gave me a pen and paper, are there 12 teams in the Big 12?
No, there can't be.
If you gave me a pen and paper and said there are 12 teams in the Big 12, can you name them? I don't know if I'd get more than... If, I got the wrong answer for naming a team that wasn't in the conference.
There's 16 of them.
Boy, maybe 10.
Teams. Oh, you could get more than 10.
I think I would name teams, though, that aren't in the Big 12, and that would be wrong.
Right. Like SMU's in the ACC. They're not in the Big 12. How many people know SMU, who, by the way, is right on the very outside of the college football playoff, who couldn't make the college football playoff?
Yeah, SMU as an ACC team is just like Notre Dame plays SMU in a ACC basketball game this year.
I'm like, what? I don't know who their basketball coach is. Now, who does Notre Dame have again tonight?
Stonehill. I know nothing.
The Fighting Stonehill.
What should I know? Northeast Conference.
God bless you. I have no idea. All I know is it better not be a close game.
Oh, God.
it better not be 89-85 with 2 minutes to go. That won't be good.
I can't wait. Have I told you how much I love Micah Shrewsbury and the Irish? I can't believe they got Jalen Harrelson.
What time is that? What time is
7
that?
o'clock.
7. Okay,
ESPN
so it's
Plus.
perfect. 7 o'clock. ESPN Plus.
We'll go multi-screen
Yeah.
viewing there.
Oh, you have to.
Bally better behave for me, or FanDuel, whatever it's called.
I did. It's funny, the FanDuel thing. I've been having issues getting it on my TV, but it's been working on my phone and my iPad.
I've had phone issues.
Okay, so I had so many issues. There was no one to contact. And I was like, man, I don't want to go on the air and rip them. Okay, but I was going to the other day. I put in my password from 2 passwords ago, and it worked on the TV. So it's working on the TV on an old password, and it's working on the new and correct password on all my other things: the tablet, the iPad, the phone. Go figure. Like, how does that happen?
How about you being respectful and not ripping them?
Well, I mean, I like the guys. It's not their fault. I feel like if I'm ripping them, Christian Ayers, like, why?
Stop.
It's the establishment. It's not the worker. It's the establishment.
Exactly.
That's screwing everybody over.
Very lucky to have the great Christian Ayers.
Sure we are.
Quinn Buckner at times. I don't know. I feel like he can really talk a lot. Jeremiah Johnson, outstanding. So yeah, I no, the viewing experience with the people, terrific.
Yes, it's great.
Yes, the establishment, as you said,
maybe not so much.
Not very good. Zach Osterman joining us here in a few. One thing that I want to bring up with Zach, obviously we'll throw a little IU football and basketball at him. When you talk about Kurt Cignetti and the hire, it's just like, and obviously a ton of credit goes to Kurt Cignetti. But I do think there were some tea leaves in recent years, Andy, where IU administratively finally was like, yeah, we need to care about football more. There are a lot. I think old IU would have held on to Tom Allen a little longer.
Or got a coordinator, paid him $1.5 million, and went on and won 4 games.
They would have. So I think there is a little bit of administrative credit there of like finally realizing, oh my gosh, we've got to get football right. Or else, hell, they might ship us out of here, from a Big Ten standpoint.
And not even right. Just be a bowl team. Be 7 and 5.
So, Zach, again, has got a little bit more historical perspective on that side of it. So, from an administrative standpoint, whether it's, hey, we've got to swallow a big financial hit with Tom Allen here, but, if we don't get this right soon,
has it paid itself off?
Really, really costly. Yes.
Again, tickets are $300 to to get in. Yeah. $250,
secondary
$260
ticket market for
to
Michigan
get into the game.
Is insane.
It's unbelievable.
All right, let's hit a morning checkdown.
The Morning Checkdown, brought to you by Marian University Football, pursuing another NAIA championship this season. Don't miss the on-campus action at Ascension St. Vincent Field. Visit NUKnights.com for tickets.
Yeah, we can go quickly through this. We'll get to the Pacers here in a second. Colts did nothing yesterday. Not a surprise for the NFL trade deadline. KB, I would say the big ones, of course, we had the Bills getting Amari Cooper and the Chiefs getting DeAndre Hopkins. That happened over a week ago. The Steelers active, getting Preston Smith and Mike Williams. Ravens get Tre'Davious White from the Rams. And the Washington Commanders get Marshawn Lattimore from the New Orleans Saints. So those are the big ones. Again, it's coming up on Sunday. It's Colts and Bills. That one currently at about 5 points if you want to bet that one.
Kirk just asked me if Notre Dame was playing a winery tonight in Stonehill.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
These early season games can, there's some interesting teams you'll never hear from ever again. Tonight might be one of them.
I know. I'm like, what are we doing here? I'm like,
got to get a win.
Before you know, they're going to have Oliver Winery coming up here next on the schedule for the Irish. All right, tonight inside of Gamebridge Fieldhouse, again, the Pacers, as we said to Tony East, he was a little surprised, I think, by that line. 6.5-point favorite. No Paolo Banchero, and Orlando has struggled mightily to score without him. They've lost 4 in a row since they beat the Pacers, with Banchero scoring 50 a couple weeks ago. Aaron Nesmith is out. Andrew Nembhard is questionable. Pacers' lone home game of the week. They will go to Charlotte on Friday, and then they will have the Knicks coming up 5 o'clock on Sunday. That is at home. So just the current week, this is the lone home game.
Reminder, tonight, again, we'll talk with Zach Osterman about it. Indiana in action coming up tonight. SIU Edwardsville, 8 o'clock. You can watch it. Big Ten Network. You can hear it over on WIBC. Let's take a break. Coming up on the other side, Indiana football, 8 in the college football playoff rankings. Is that about right? And what's at stake this year for Mike Woodson and company? We'll talk with Zach Osterman. We'll do it next here on The Fan.
Pacers, and now we head to the Indianapolis Star, a man who's covered the Indiana Hoosiers for a long time. Zach Osterman joins us, does great work on that end. Zach, I actually want to start here, and I don't know, maybe it's a nerd question. Maybe you don't want to reveal too much. Football season is having a season unlike any other. Are your numbers for football stories and related content similar to basketball? Like, has it reached that level, or does a story about the Tennessee exhibition game still outweigh anything on the football level?
No, I mean, football is pretty much running, I would say, dead even right now. I mean, that's, to be honest, I used to pay a lot closer attention to those things than I do now. I've kind of learned to just trust the people who understand the metrics and engagement and all that better than me to keep one finger on the pulse. But generally speaking, like, the interest is absolutely there at a level that, I think it's rarely been seen for football in terms of everything we write, whether it's, kind of big moments like, obviously when they win a game, but also just little stuff, little updates, little bits and pieces. It's, that's, this is the life of a really good football program, I think.
It's unbelievable. We were laughing, Zach. You're so used to doing football stuff, but now you're really doing football stuff. I mean, now it's like, oh my God, this team might, could they go undefeated or just lose one game in college football playoff? And let's go there. So last night we see the rankings come out. Indiana at 8, and because it's too confusing, they're actually 9 in the bracket. Were they respected, disrespected, underrated, respected properly? How would you describe what the committee did with the Hoosiers last night?
I thought it was about fair. I wondered if they'd be a little higher, but I think the committee clearly had, at least sort of some sense of need to respect that, Indiana's strength of schedule. I think ESPN had it up there. I mean, theirs was substantially lower than basically any other team in the field, and I think it seemed like Reese Davis was kind of going out of his way to say, they have one of the toughest remaining schedules. So, the sort of implicit suggestion there is that Indiana is going to get a chance to sort of further prove itself. And I think the big piece of that obviously is the Ohio State game. But I think they also, they put Indiana in a position where, at least to me, I would look at that and I would say, I think that Indiana should be able to make the playoff even if it loses to Ohio State. And I think if you were Indiana, that is probably the signal that you wanted more than any other, was just that there was a path for you into the playoff field, even if you lost that Ohio State game. And I think there was a pretty clear respect from Ward Manuel, the selection committee chair, who's obviously the AD at Michigan, for what Indiana has achieved thus far. I mean, he came kind of armed with some pretty direct, statistics to cite for why Indiana wound up where it wound up. And I would point out, Indiana's, I know that they get bumped down because BYU gets the last bye as the 4th highest rated champion, but it's worth saying, Indiana's ahead of BYU. Indiana's comfortably ahead of the only 2-loss SEC team in the field. Indiana's ahead of 1-loss Notre Dame. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be. I'm just saying this seemed to be kind of the way the committee struck a sort of a balance of, hey, Indiana has not, necessarily played the toughest schedule on earth, but what they have played, they have looked absolutely impressive. And so we're going to put them in a situation where they're probably, I suspect, going to be able to still get into the playoff without having to beat Ohio State.
He is Zach Osterman, again, outstanding work covering IU for the Indy Star. Zach, you have, I think, a perfect person to ask because you've covered the beat, obviously, for a while. And Curt Cignetti undoubtedly deserves the bulk of the praise for just how serious this rebuild has taken place over the last 9 months. But administratively, you have said, like, you felt like there were some tea leaves where IU has kind of looked itself in the mirror and said, all right, enough is enough. We need to really start caring about football. Where have some of those major steps been pre the hire of Curt Cignetti?
Well, I mean, obviously you can go back 10, 12, even 15 years to the extent to which Indiana, kind of committed to using Big Ten Network money as a vehicle for getting better in football. I think we used to sort of measure this in just like the raw, basically how much you get paying your head coach, and is that proof that it's you're committed enough. I think where we're at now is more just kind of the idea of, are you handing your head coach the resources necessary? And I think it's pretty clear from the way Curt Cignetti was able to staff and what he was able to achieve in the transfer portal. I think it's probably pretty fair to say that Indiana handed him what he needed. I mean, look around, he seemed to get just about every first choice among sort of staffers. And he's obviously got a team that's perfectly capable of competing at the top of the Big Ten. The other thing I would say is, I mean, it sounds simplistic. I understand that, but Indiana sanctioned a firing that cost him $15.5 million, of a football coach that was making more money at the time annually than the basketball coach was. And they went out and hired a coach that's making roughly, I think, the same, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less, certainly more now, considering all the bonuses that are kind of coming his way. But my point is that, we used to sort of, when the arms race was in full swing, we used to sort of set these hard targets and say, like, if you are if you want to be competitive in football, you've got to do X, Y, and Z. And there's just no other choice. Now, I think because of the portal, because of NIL, I think some of that has changed. But I think that what you need more than anything else is just to show that you're willing to do what's necessary, even if sometimes it's hard. Like, for example, spending a lot of money to move on from a coach, whose race is kind of run, showing that you are willing and able to do that. And then when the time comes, sort of seize your opportunity. And thus far, obviously, Indiana has done that as well.
Zach Osterman with us from the Star on this Wednesday on the Payless Liquors hotline. From football and all the good there to now the basketball side. Mike Woodson, your number 4 kicks off tonight, or I should say tips off tonight there in Assembly Hall. Let me ask you this one, Zach. If they're really, really good this year and they live up or exceed expectations, why would that be the case? And if they don't live up to expectations this season, what could trip them up along the way, do you think?
Well, I think that, kind of to start with the first question first, I think for me, the thing that I think could make them really good is just that I think they might have the best roster in the conference. And, having the best roster doesn't guarantee you success. But I suspect this is as talented of a team 1 through 5 and maybe 1 through 9. And I think that when Mike Woodson put it together through the portal and everything, I think he purpose-built it to play a certain way. I think there's every suggestion that he wants to embrace this, sort of less bully ball, more sort of small, fast, shoot some more threes, just generally play with a lot more pace, kind of brand of basketball that Indiana is trying to adopt here through Miles Rice, through some of these lineups that basically by their nature are just going to have to be smaller because Indiana doesn't have the personnel to run too big as often as it has in the past couple of years. But I think the answer to the second question is, if Indiana can't figure that out, a balance of that is more efficient offensively, more successful offensively, without giving up too much at the other end of the floor. Because if you're not going to play as much too big basketball, then obviously you're going to wind up in a position sometimes where maybe you struggle to rebound the ball, maybe you struggle to protect the rim as well. So I would say it's, if it works, I think more than anything else, it's going to be because in the end we are talking about a a basketball team that's really well constructed for what it wants to be and has injuries, luck with injuries and so forth provided, has some depth and some opportunities to be really versatile. If it doesn't work, it'll be because basically Mike Woodson just could not kind of figure out how to put the pieces together in a way that made all that work without sacrificing too much at the other end of the floor, if that makes sense.
Zach, last one for me. And again, thanks for the time. Zach Osterman, Indy Star, covers IU athletics with us here on the Payless Liquors hotline. If I set an over-under at like 2.5 for their finish in the Big Ten, maybe 5.5 for their seed in the NCAA tournament, do you think that's like a good, I don't know how much of a gambler you are, but is that like a good, you think like kind of baseline over-under for how this season should be viewed walking into it tonight?
I think that's probably about fair. It's the one thing I'd say, and I think that we're still working through this in football as well as basketball, is it's hard to get a great feel for these new conferences, sure. And to like bring it back to football, I think part of the difficulty with sort of evaluating a team like Indiana is we're not used to teams and conferences like the Big Ten having such, frankly, soft schedules. But the reason that it does is because there's 18 teams and you can only play 9 of them in a season. And so every once in a while, you're going to wind up in a situation where you just don't play that many of the top conference competitors. I mean, Oregon plays Ohio State plays Penn State, Ohio State plays Indiana, but Oregon doesn't play Penn State. Oregon doesn't play Indiana. Penn State doesn't play Indiana. And I think that we're still figuring out how to parse that in football. And I suspect we're going to wind up going through some of the same process in basketball. Now, it's a little bit different because in basketball, you do get to play everybody. You just about everybody, you only play once, but you do get to play everyone. But when you start talking about, you have to finish here in the conference, or, it has to look like this or whatever. I think that the only thing that gives me pause, and I think those numbers are probably just about fair, the only thing that really gives me pause is, do we wind up in a situation where, essentially we kind of find out that this new conference just works real weird and we have to sort of update like what the KPIs and the baselines are, because it turns out that an 18-team conference is just an unwieldy beast that kind of has to be treated differently. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I think that's actually very, very well said. Zach, congrats to your Falcons on a nice start to the season. Great work, per usual, from you. I know it'll be a busy fall and a very busy month of December, maybe more than you would have thought at the start of the season. But as always, man, thanks for the time.
Thanks for having me, as always. Good talking to you.
Zach Osterman, Payless Liquors Hotline. One thing to note, football-wise, Andy, they've got that big quarterback recruit visiting this weekend.
Oh,
did you see that?
I did see that, yeah.
Juju Lewis. I remember we had Matt Weaver from Pigs on earlier in the year. And again, this is a 4- or 5-star recruit committed to USC, but flirts more than your, insert your comment here. I'll probably pause after making any statement there.
Yeah,
but
good luck.
Auburn, Colorado, Indiana, some of the other schools. So, Curtis Rourke, life without him. Is it Tyler Cherry from Center Grove? Is it Taven Jackson? What do you do?
Indiana's on better ground than the better footing than Auburn football. Go figure. I mean, that's true. That's true by quite a bit, honestly. So if you missed that conversation, check out the Podcast Center, 1075thefan.com. Pop quiz time on this Wednesday, 239-1070. Load them up, 239-1070. Pop quiz. We'll wrap up the show next.
Can you handle the pressure? Sharpen your pencils. It's time for the Pop Quiz with KB and Andy. Brought to you by Jiffy Lube, Indiana's favorite oil change since 1985.
One thing I want to get into tomorrow, Andy, and looking at the college football playoff rankings and maybe think of this. Let's debate a Notre Dame one-loss resume and potentially an IU one-loss resume.
You want to do that tomorrow? Or do you want to do it right now in 60 seconds?
Because think about the one loss each of those teams would theoretically have.
Yeah.
And we're playing out just Vegas odds the rest of the way. Again, I actually think IU can keep it pretty competitive against Ohio State, but IU's one loss would be at Ohio State. Notre Dame's one loss would be against a 500 MAC team.
But Notre Dame's going to have a host of better wins.
Sure,
I mean, they're going to have
sure.
all the better wins. Texas A&M could end up being a good win or a great win. Louisville can end up being a iffy win or a pretty good win.
4 ranked wins, 3 away from home.
Yeah.
Like that.
I know.
IU doesn't have a single ranked win.
And they're Notre Dame.
So,
come on. They're Notre Dame.
But like that, that is a debate we could have.
I know it
at
is.
some point. I don't know if it would be for the last spot, but that is a debate we could have. And certainly in this state, you would have a lot of people scrambling in their closet of exactly which gear to pull out. It is time for the pop quiz. Give us a number 1 through 8.
Let's go caller number 4 today, Mark. How does that sound?
Sounds like John.
All right. John, what's up, man? How are you?
Did I hear him drop?
I think literally just dropped
I think
off.
John just dropped. Well, everyone else did too. So
sometimes you get scared because you hear your name.
That's like me
not
peeing in the urinal in front of all those women at the Taylor Swift concert.
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna say at the 500.
Well, that
in the
is.
trough.
I mean, you want to talk about a closely compacted urinal there? Yeah, that is.
You might have some stage fright.
Well,
By the way, this is
sword fights. You don't have to go very
well,
far
no,
if you want to take
don't.
part in those.
This is I would say 3 out of 5 you can get, and then the last couple going to be a little bit more difficult. You're going to have to know some stuff.
So either we're going to need an ASAP call, or I will refrain from looking.
You can do that debate you were going to just do.
Or I am looking at the pop quiz.
Well, I've already looked at it. See, I could give you the
questions.
questions.
The pop quiz, so I guess I could take it, and if we did get a 5 for 5er here, we could give the Jiffy Lube oil change away.
What do you want to do? Do you want to wait about 1 more minute? Okay, so the phone lines are blown up again, 239-1070. Like I said, the first 3 I think you can get, but after that, you're going to have to know some stuff,
Mark,
as they
who
would
we got?
say.
Hey, Scott, how are you?
Good, yourself?
Scott, we are well on this Wednesday morning. Andy Sweeney will toss number 1 your way.
All right, let's get a winner. Let's be quick here. Number 1, Pacers Magic tonight at the Fieldhouse. Who leads the all-time series, Pacers or Magic?
Pacers.
Number 2 here, Scott. Ball State, they engaged in a little Tuesday night maction on a rainy night in Muncie. Who beat the Cardinals last night? Was it Miami, Ohio, Bowling Green, or Buffalo?
Let's go Red Hawks.
Look at that.
I even knew that.
Man, you know your math.
That's pretty good. I like that. All right, question number 3. Which of the following NFL teams is not leading its division in the NFC? Is not leading its division in the NFC. Washington, Minnesota, Arizona, Atlanta.
Minnesota.
Scott, happy 155th birthday to college football. On this day in 1869, the first college football game was played. Name the 2 teams involved. Was it Harvard?
Go ahead.
I'm kind of interested to hear what you were going to say,
He
Scott.
might know it.
Oh, I was thinking Princeton Rutgers, but I'm...
Scott, give us your background. Were you valedictorian in high school? How do you know all this stuff?
I just pay attention, man.
Do you have Greg Rakestraw next to you?
Holy
I wish.
Yeah, that's a good man.
So there you go.
All right,
Boy,
last
I should have
one.
voted for Scott yesterday, it sounds like.
This is, he's a write-in candidate. All right, last one. It's not easy. On this day in
Don't tell it to
sports...
Scott it's not easy.
You know what? You're exactly right. On this day in sports history, a Cy Young Award was won by a relief pitcher for the first time. Who was the first reliever to win a Cy Young? Now, do you know it before I give you the answers? Do you know it?
I have a 50-50 guess.
Say the name, Scott.
Who do you think it is?
It's either Gossage or Eckersley.
Okay, well, both of those are wrong. So,
Okay.
Raleigh Fingers, Bruce Sutter, Mike Marshall, Sparky Lyle.
Pursuiter.
Wow. All right, number one here, all-time series, Pacers Magic, not very close, 72-55, the Pacers. He knew the Miami Redhawks nickname. I guess that was somewhat impressive.
That's pretty good.
The Vikings are not leading the division.
Of course, you got the Lions at 7-1.
How about number 4?
Yeah, he's got Rutgers and Princeton. Easy. The score was 6-4.
When he said that answer, I'm like, we need him to pee in a cup.
Okay.
We got to drug test him.
Right, we got to do something. We got to pluck some hair from him.
He didn't even need the answers.
No, he just moved on. But he got number 5 wrong.
A little too cocky
it
for
kills me.
Scott. A little too cocky for Scotty.
First reliever to win a Cy Young was Mike Marshall, 1974.
What should we know about Mike, Scotty? I know nothing.
104
appearances in a year. Dear Lord. Gosh, did his arm fall off?
Well, no, back then they were men.
No, of course not.
You kidding me? He made his arm stronger.
Pacers need to get this one. They're catching a good break tonight. Paulo Banchero is out. They are favored by 6.5 for a reason. Back at home, get to 500, get to 3 of, that would be 3 of 4. You're at Charlotte on Friday. Important here for the Pacers to take care of business.
Yeah, I would agree. Tonight's one of those. Last year they had some games where they were the better team. They were supposed to win, even games at home, and they did not win. Let's see if that changes tonight. Jake and Jimmy, Jake's back. JMV at 3. Everyone have a fine afternoon right here on The Fan.